Mech pilots, online. BattleTech manuals, online. Long-term memory, offline. All systems bungled. Initiating BungleTech podcast.
In our 10th deployment of BungleTech, we are doing something extra special. I took some time recently to reach out to all active BattleTech podcast content creators to chat. Yes, that's right. All BattleTech podcast content creators. And I heard back from the vast majority of them. This episode is going to consist of sharing these interviews, interwoven with a little intellectually sensual treat from my spheroid co-host Michael. Due to the total length of these interviews, we will be taking a break from our other regular segments, which will return in glory in episode 11 next month with a special surprise. Get ready, Mech Warriors. This is going to be an inspirational engagement. But before I start, a quick note. In order to provide a reasonable scope for this endeavor, I reached out to content creators exclusively focused on BattleTech in the podcast medium. This means I didn't touch base with a few well-known BattleTech creators. Examples that come to mind: Big Red, MechFrog, and Tex. Obviously, these are amazing creators, and I just want to emphasize, I only didn't reach out to them because of the scope of this endeavor. A larger scope would have blown up my brain, and we already know I gotta keep the few Steel Viper brain cells I have remaining in perfect genetically engineered working order. My brain cells aside, to ensure that all creators were interviewed equitably, I asked all creators the same core questions with a random bonus question thrown into the mix. Anywho, that aside, without further ado, in today's episode I'm privileged to chat with Battle Babes, BattlePod, Battletopia Stories, the Calgary BattleTech League, the MechBay, Mercenary Star, of Mechs and Men, on the Origins of BattleMechs, Renegade HPG, Unicorn Company, the Valhalla Club, and Wolfnet. Time codes for each interview can be found in the podcast description. My Mech Warrior friends, let's get this deployment on the battlefield.
Primary objective, podcast topic segment, initiating.
Hi everyone, today I am joined with the amazing Travis from the Renegade HPG podcast. Travis, how you doing, man?
I'm doing well, Nate. Thanks for inviting me on.
Dude, thank you for being here and for all you create for the BattleTech community. I'm a big fan, not gonna lie. Big fan.
Excellent. I'm glad to hear it. I got to say, I don't listen to a ton of BattleTech content just because time is short and there's so much out there. But I was able to listen to one of your most recent podcasts and really, really enjoyed it. I think it was kind of right up my alley in terms of the things I enjoy listening to, kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of the rule set. Forgot the name of your guest, but yeah, I love hearing how kind of the sausage is made, if you can't tell from my own podcasting. So you guys are doing great work over there. Good to be able to listen to somebody that's not myself, to listen to myself saying every second sentence, even though I could have sworn I finished the last podcast and didn't say it once, but thus is the nature of listening to yourself.
Oh, I edit out the you-knows and the uhs. That's why you don't hear them with us.
I started that in my early podcasting, and I just don't have 10 hours a day to edit so it had to stay in there eventually.
It's hell. It's hell. But anyhow, let's talk about your podcast. So you're obviously very established in the BattleTech community. You've been around for a long time. How long has your podcast been active?
So I want to say, I think it was June of 2020 that I did my first episode, and kind of dove in. Obviously, while things were shut down and we were all locked in our houses, I was able to be way more prolific with the podcast, and things have slowed down recently as, you go back to life and add more kids to the family. But yeah, so mid 2020 was when it kind of kicked off.
So 3 years then, almost 3 years by a month.
Oh, wow. It is 3 years. Yeah, thanks for pointing that out. Yeah, it's crazy how time flies.
Happy anniversary.
Thank you.
So your name, what's the story behind it? I've always been curious.
Oh, God, that's a fun question. I wish my memory was sharp as I'd like it to be, but I can tell you it took me many, many, many weeks of kind of playing with ideas and kind of coming up with possible names. For me, branding is a really kind of important thing for me, both kind of just visual and text, because I hate kind of the in-person side of marketing, like the sales side, but I love kind of the branding side. And so I've got like so many domain names of like cool brand names that I've just come up with and probably will never do anything with. But I just sat for weeks and weeks and weeks. There's probably like 7 or 8 weeks kind of going in and out of names. I wish I could remember some of the early drafts, but I mean, the HPG really fit with the kind of broadcasting element of it. I really wanted to focus on just kind of getting information out and kind of exploring and communicating and talking to people. And so the HPG seemed natural, and kind of the Renegade, it just seemed cool, like breaking from the mold and kind of doing my own thing. And so yeah, came Renegade HPG. As soon as that one entered my head, I knew that was the one, and my weeks long search of musing on it was over.
Well, your voice print, I think, is really good for the term renegade. You sort of sound like someone who drives a Harley or something like that. You know, you sound a little bit badass.
No Harleys. That's my dad. My dad actually founded like a very large bike club, Fire and Iron bike club for firefighters. But yeah, he's been riding Harleys all his life. I have never been on a Harley, but yeah, I've been told my voice works well for podcasting, so I embrace that and kind of hope people enjoy it.
Well, honestly, you don't need to ride a Harley with a voice like that. You ride a Harley to get a voice like that, good sir.
Excellent.
So your podcast is pretty unique. Like the topics you discuss, you probably get the biggest variety of industry guests. It's just amazing. So I'm really curious about this question. What does your podcast aim to bring to the community?
It's pretty selfish in the sense of like I just want to find things that I'm interested in and people that I want to talk to and share that with everybody else and share that conversation. Cause like obviously if I'm having the conversation, I think these are awesome people to talk to and really interesting. And if all I got to do is kind of click the record and do a bit of editing for several hours to kind of share that same insight and experience with other people, I'm happy to do so. But in terms of kind of how I'm picking people, it's really just like when I see something interesting, something cool, like I just reach out to the person. I want to talk about it. I'm really interested in creativity and people's creativity and how things are made and kind of the struggles they go through to make it and their thought process. And so it's exciting to me to talk to people about that. And I really like the fact that there are other people that can enjoy that with me and kind of really learn about not only BattleTech history, but just kind of connect with the creators and appreciate what kind of goes into, this pretty awesome IP that we all kind of come to love.
I think that your podcast really stands out in terms of some of the almost tangible deliverables it's brought into the community. For example, you remastered the BattleTech cartoon, which is huge. And I watched it on your channel before I knew about your podcast, funnily enough.
Awesome. Yep.
That you're running the BattleTech TCG revival group. You're trying to bring that game back to life. That's obviously a huge effort organizing tournaments. Like I know how that can be.
Definitely.
And the Gallery 3025, right? Like you're managing that, and that's all about bringing art to the community.
It is, yeah. And kind of again, it's just like, what are the things that I think will be fun? And can I share it with other people while I go? So yeah, the cartoon was a really fun thing to do. And I was not the instigator for that. And so Emil, who does the Art of BattleTech Twitter, who used that Twitter just to kind of celebrate BattleTech art a lot in the same way that Gallery 3025 does. And he just was really on top of the early AI technology for using that to upscale things. And, it's commonplace now, but 3 years ago, it definitely was not. And he had, put a tweet out there that he was going to do that with the cartoon. And I kind of tried to look to see if he had a platform for Art of BattleTech, and he didn't. It turned out in retrospect that he did. It was just under a different name, but I didn't know that at the time. And I reached out and was like, hey, I would be delighted to kind of host this for you. Because at least at that time, I had built a moderate following. It certainly wasn't what I had now. I thought it'd be really cool to kind of collaborate. And then, yeah, we just dove into that project, and that was just a ton of fun. It was a lot of work, but it was lots of fun work, and kind of published and then deleted and republished, episodes a couple times as we continually found better source files. If you upscale something that's total garbage, it just doesn't really work. And so there was a lot of work trying to track down good files to use. And then as we publish things, more people came out of the woodwork with better and better files. And so we would just replace them with the new ones as we got them. And certainly in terms of contribution community, it's certainly the most rewarding thing I've done. My favorite comment is when people to me and say, hey, look, I can watch this with my kids because the quality's enough that they'll focus on it. As work before, it definitely was not. And so, yeah, that was a ton of fun. big props to Emil for doing that. And then later, Chris and Tom, members of the community, helped me kind of do a second round of upscales about a year and a half later when we got a DVD of very high quality source files. So yeah, props to those guys, and they deserve so much credit as well. But that was a fun one. And yeah, there's been other ones. I mean, MechWarrior Bulldogs with Bruins, and being able to kind of help him get over the line with that, with funding that we drew. That was the first project for Gallery 3025, which his goal is just to kind of make cool things to share with the community and kind of bring community funds together. Just kind of have a basic crowdfund it, have a bunch of people giving, $2. And if you get enough people giving $2, then you can actually do something with it. So yeah, that was a ton of fun. But yeah, there's cool stuff. And like I said, it's just, I do the things that I know interest me and kind of share them with everybody else, because I figure there's got to be other people that share some of my interests.
So one thing that you sort of changed in my life, which is really friggin' cool, is specifically regarding the BattleTech TCG, because I've tried to get my wife into BattleTech, and she's like, obviously it's BattleTech, man. It's
Yeah.
BattleTech. It's hard to get people into BattleTech. We know this.
Yeah.
But on your podcast, you're like, oh yeah, I introduced my wife to it and she enjoyed it. And so I'm like, I'm gonna try the card game on my wife. And dude, she friggin' enjoys it. I can't believe it. I'm actually playing the card game with her.
That's awesome.
It's crazy. It's crazy. I always looked for something I can do with my wife because we're completely different. I'm sort of this nerdy white dude. She's this beautiful, elegant Persian. We're just different levels of class. I'm wearing like muscle shirts. She's in fancy flowing dresses.
Awesome. I love it.
So thank you for that gift, good sir,
My pleasure.
because we're having a blast with it.
Yeah, I mean, the card game was kind of like the impetus, the catalyst for the podcast, because the first couple podcasts were talking about the card game, and I'd come from playing X-Wing was my big competitive game before then, and X-Wing has a lot of wonderful podcasts, and some of my favorites were Mighty Squadron podcast, and there's another one. My memory's failing me now, but yeah, it helped me so much with my gameplay, and yeah, I picked up the game, and I was like, oh, I want to do like a podcast like them and just kind of talk about strategy, and so yeah, so that's great.
So you already sort of talked about it a little bit. I mean, I think it's evident what makes your podcast special or unique. But is there any specific highlight, anything else that you'd really like to emphasize that this is what makes Renegade HPG Renegade HPG?
Well, I think it's just, we want to kind of communicate and understand. So the goal of these conversations is to grant insight to the community and to get the community to support each other by understanding kind of what goes into things and understanding kind of, who it is behind these products that they're creating. And yeah, and so that's what I'm a big fan of communication. I think it's certainly lacking in our current kind of society and what's going on. And so if I can kind of contribute to that and just get people talking with each other and listening to each other, I think that's a big thing for me. And be curious. I think people aren't curious enough. I think there's too much kind of self-righteousness and not enough humility and curiosity. And so hopefully I can bring that with the podcast and just kind of, I want to learn people's stories and kind of what inspires their passions, because everybody has a great story, especially if you get people talking about their passion. Great way to get everybody to smile.
And yeah, I think that really comes through, right? Your guests just reveal such insights. I've learned so much.
Awesome.
So many interesting tidbits about the Battletech universe and fiction. Can't even list them off. Obviously, you've been playing Battletech for a while. You've been ingrained in the universe. Is there a specific bungle that really is significant to your mind? Like favorite, most interesting, most unique bungle that you've experienced in the Battletech universe? That could be in the gameplay. That could be in the politics of BattleTech, or however you want to interpret that.
So define bungle a little bit more for me. Is it just like a, goofy rule or an event that happened in a game, or?
It can be anything. It can be like a mistake. It can be dropping the ball. It can be forgetting a rule. It can be doing a rule wrong. It could be literally dropping the ball in any aspect.
It was dropping something. I'll go to my first experience playing tabletop after like a 25-year hiatus or something like that. We're talking like probably 97 to 2020 or 2019 or something like that. And I connected with someone that I didn't know in the area, and we just kind of hooked up at a local game store and kind of set up the table. And I'm a very tactical mindset, and so I'm kind of moving around the board. And I just remember him just kind of charging my stalker with a bunch of mechs. and just started kicking me. I failed every freaking PS roll, and it was the worst freaking experience. I was not kind of containing my frustration. I wasn't like throwing anything, but it was clear that I was like not having a good time with it. And so yeah, and that's gave me a little appreciation for some of the kind of odder, quirkier things that you can do in BattleTech, just if you want to kind of exploit some rules rather than actually kind of get some good thematic, wargaming action. So that's in terms of standing out. That Bungle certainly that stands out to me as a as a negative play experience. But yeah, yeah, I think that stalker fell down. Well, it fell down every turn until it died. It never stood up. And it went into that first kick with full health, and I'm like, "What is this medium mech going in close range to my stalker with?" And that was it. Yeah, by the end, it was basically just like I had gotten jumped. There were like 3 mechs around me kicking me every turn. It was no fun.
I just visualize in my head the stalker, this sort of chunky, strong-looking, muscular figure walking through the alley, and 3 skinny Jenners with bandanas step out. Hey, what you doing in our neighborhood, punk?
Yeah.
Stalker's like, I don't want any trouble. Kick him in the shins.
And this would have been before the redesign, so it was still kind of like the standard leg stalker with kind of the normal human knees, and which you look at and you're like, that thing will never get up if it falls down. I don't even know how it's possible. So I guess in that sense it was thematic because it's just it wouldn't work. But so maybe I'm complaining erroneously. Maybe it was way more thematic than I gave it credit for. That stalker would never actually get up.
Oh man. All right, I'm really curious about this. Okay. Because your perspective is very unique, I think, in the BattleTech podcast community. So I'm really, really hyped to ask you this question. But if you could place yourself in the BattleTech universe, who would you be, what would you do, and where would you be? And why, my friend, why?
Oh, I've thought about this. I would be exploring the deep periphery, uncharted worlds. Like just the chance to kind of go places no one has been. That would be so cool. I would even envision if I could somehow just kind of break away from the inner sphere, not even be like part of the Explorer Corps with Comstar, but just kind of somehow get my little group of people that are just like, I'm done with this shit, all this war and stuff. Get a couple jump ships, get enough drop ships, get some people that just want to take a chance and start jumping into the unknown to see what's out there and find a new world. I think that, if I could do something in BattleTech, that would be it.
Damn. I was really wondering if you were going to say, I want to be an elemental warrior. I didn't think you would, but I was curious if you're going there because I know you're a bit of an elemental fanboy.
Oh yeah, I could go on and on about elementals for sure.
Yeah, being part of clan culture isn't necessarily the best though, right?
No, that would not be my first choice to be part of clans.
Yeah, let me grow old somewhere happily rather than,
Yeah, it's the possibility, man. The possibility of the place combined with the technology. Yeah, that's what excited me. But it's funny. I originally went into college to study theoretical astrophysics because I was inspired by BattleTech. Actually, I remember my AOL username was Kearney2020. Kearney being one of the creators of the Kearney Fuchsia jump drive, and 2020 being the year that kind of had a breakthrough. So yeah, BattleTech kind of inspired that, and then I ended up stepping away from that because I don't retain hard facts, and so by the time I got to quantum physics, I was like, I can't problem solve my way through this. I do actually have to kind of retain data to get through. But that was the start, and so yeah, BattleTech had a huge influence on young Travis, and yeah, that idea of kind of space travel, yeah, that's still there in me for sure.
That's amazing. So, dude, this has been wonderful, and it's been an honor, good sir. Thank you for this. If
My
people
pleasure.
don't know who you are, which is unlikely if they're listening to my podcast and don't know about your podcast, but let's just say that one person out there, how can they find you?
Fortunately, I've managed to keep the tags consistent. Renegade HPG on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. I think that's all of them. And then Helm Memory Core is kind of like the sister channel on YouTube where I kind of archive like old media. So that's where I ended up moving the cartoons and some of the old MechWarrior 2 soundtracks to try to kind of restore those. So yeah, they can find me in those places.
Rock on. And if you're one of those people out there that have yet to hear Renegade HPG or listen to any of their podcasts, I extremely recommend it. I also extremely recommend watching the BattleTech cartoon because it is cheesy, amazing fun. I love it. And especially if you even seen an episode when you're young, man, it's just,
It's funny. I watched it when it came out, And they had such a weird schedule of playing it, and I hadn't seen half the episodes. And so when I was going through doing that remaster, half those episodes I was watching for the first time, because I feel like they just played the first, like, 5 or 6 episodes over and over and over again.
Yeah, that was the same with me. Like, it was the first time I had a cohesive arc when I was watching it. I'm like, oh, there actually is a story. Interesting. Well, good sir, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thanks for the invitation, and thanks for what you're doing too. It's fun to be able to listen to somebody else talk about the things I'm interested in.
Heck yeah. All right, I'll see you on the BattleTech TCG table.
Yes, you will.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. The Whitworth medium mech first hit the battlefield in 2610, but unfortunately developed a reputation for tearing its own legs off during aggressive maneuvering. Though you might still see some of these mechs on the battlefield today, those still standing have likely had their defective hip actuators replaced. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hey everyone, we are back with, this is pretty exciting, from Germany, EK, from the BattlePod podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today and answering some questions.
Hi, thanks for the invitation. I'm pretty excited. Excited is the right word.
Heck yeah, we're both excited, man. Well, thank you for being here, and feel free to throw in random German words if you want to, just to confuse our listeners. I'm totally okay with that.
I will do it.
So, BattlePod, how long has your podcast been active for?
Our first episode was published on January the 7th, 2018 at 20 o'clock and 40 minutes.
So that means you've been around for over 5 years.
Yeah, I think so. Today I looked for when our first episode was, and I said, oh, it's a long time ago.
Wow, you must be one of the oldest BattleTech podcasts out there probably then.
And I can say the biggest one in Germany. Also because we are the only one, but
This is so typical. Germans that have a longer history than North Americans. It's perfect.
I don't know if America has not a smaller timeline because they are German, British, and all the others. So it's the same history, only we have a little split up. But I think it's the same length.
Spoken like a true BattleTech brother. So, what's the story behind the name of your podcast?
No, I can say back in the day at 2018, most podcasts was ended up in Germany with pod. And so I used BattleTech. Oh, what can I use? BattlePod. It's a good name. Back in the day, it was that people talk about podcasts. It's always a pod.
So, if we combine our podcasts together, we would literally just become BattleTech. Yeah, oh my God, we can create a new podcast with us working together called BattleTech. Oh man.
That's nice.
Amazing. So what does your podcast aim to bring to the community? So you say you're the biggest podcast in Germany for BattleTech because you're the only podcast for Germany in BattleTech, but you've been around for a really long time. I'd love to know what your focus is on bringing stuff to the community.
My personal focus was I like the lore of BattleTech. And then back in the day, I talked to a friend of mine, a storyteller is his name in the community. And he know everything about BattleTech and the history. And I say, okay, I want to know more about the history. And then we say, okay, we will do it. And it was our first episode. We talked about what we will do and a little about the first history. And then we get our third host, Hoshi. He's from Austria. He also know really, really much about the history. And our last host is Onai. And it is really nice that we have him because before every episode, he will read the source books. So at first, we take a little look at the timeline overall, just from the beginning to after the or to the Il Clan. We don't talk about Il Clan yet, but we will. And after we talked about just only for the history, what happens then? We have talked about the history of the houses. We have already talked about Steiner. We talked about the Marek. Marek was not our loveliest history because every couple of years some Marek leader killed another one or died in an accident. Yeah, so it was many names. It was not the loveliest history podcast, but yeah, we liked it and we know more about Marek now. And also we talked about the Dragon House. Kurita, my friends and co-hosts, they are also in a BattleTech clan, the 36 Dyran Regular, but Kurita. And so that was our first, we want to talk about the history and bring the history to the community. And also I want to know more about the history because I'm not so deep in the history. And so that's also why I don't prepare very much because I can ask more dumb questions. And then over the time, we talked also about the MechWarrior Online, MechWarrior 5, the BattleTech Hardgreen Scheme game, and we will talk about everything that will happen. Not long ago, the German reseller of BattleTech lost the license. And at the moment, we don't have a German reseller, so we only have the English products. And it's quite interesting what will follow after that.
Interesting. So you're basically, everything on your podcast summarized is really focused on a historical view on BattleTech, be that in the lore or be that in the actual real world right now we live in terms of the actual games that exist or the production issues of the franchise.
We talked about both because we don't want to talk only about the in-game history. And we all love BattleTech and we all don't like the license history and the actual license. Also, with computer games this year, MechWarrior Online got another license. They can't use the tabletop license minis and so on. And then with the I don't know the name, the baddie of the BattleTech history who also go to court most times and don't make something with his license. I don't know the name at the moment.
Harmony Gold.
Would be really nice if they say, okay, here you got a license and we make a good deal and we have more of the old tabletop models. That was many in Germany want to have the old ones which they grow up, but we got new ones. They're also cool.
So what makes your podcast unique?
I think the history, just that we will talk about history from, I don't know, what's the first year? I said 2030 or so was the first in the BattleTech history. And then we go from there to, to the Il Clan area. And that's our unique, the history.
Yeah, I think that's accurate. Nothing comes to mind about a podcast that specifically focuses on history. I know there's podcasts that focus on stories, there's podcasts that focus on the history specific of mechs, but there's nothing that really goes through the timeline like what you're sort of explaining. So that's pretty cool. All right, the question of the day, because our podcast is themed on making mistakes, I just have to ask this question to everybody. What is your favorite BattleTech bungle?
I've got two. One out game. You know, you have the small laser and the large laser. And in Germany, the translation to small laser was leichter Laser. And the large laser is der schwere Laser. So schwer is for heavy and leicht is for light, not heavy. When you talk about the small laser, SL is your large laser, LL. So it was the same two letters for different lasers. You talked about a large laser, we talk about a small laser, and that was my favorite BattleTech bungle out game. And in game, my personally is that Kerensky just leave and not rebuild everything or make it a democracy. So then we don't have the many wars what are cool, but sometimes I think it would be nice if we first try it and then go away.
That is so funny. That is like a hugely political statement because you're basically saying that the Exodus was a bungle. That's hilarious. I know many people would agree with you. But that's deep. That's deep, man. And I love the language translation bungle of the of the small laser. That's freaking cool. And so much stuff like that must happen.
The German translation of the Mechs was there as well. So I just don't know the German words in the beginning, because at the last translator, they used also the English names, but at the beginning we just got different names. So we don't really know what you are talking about, because our Mech got a really different name.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we have the clan names, we have the inner sphere names in the west, and then in the east there's going to be different clan name and inner sphere names. That's crazy. We gotta do a podcast episode just dedicated to this. We're gonna do it. Well, on the topic of mechs, what is the best mech and why? The best mech.
For me personally, it's the catapult. I love LRMs, and I love the design of the catapult. I don't really know why, but it's the first mech is where I get my love to BattleTech. It was the catapult, so I love them still. And also the second best is the Steiner Scout Lance.
Oh God. I was wondering if you'd bring that up. You had to represent Germany. So is there a specific variant of the catapult? It's just the base variant of the catapult that you think is the best?
I like all of them, PPCs or LRMs. I love the LRMs more, but I like the PPC variant as well.
So what I'm hearing from you is the catapult is the best mech because you like the catapult.
Yes.
And that's as fair as it can be, baby. Thank you for your honesty. And thank you for coming on to do this interview really quick. It was amazing. I definitely want to have a more detailed conversation in the future. For people that want to listen to you, where can they find you?
Just type in BattlePod and we will be on the first side of Google as the other search engine. I'm also referenced as Der dicke Preuße. It's the heavy Prussian, you could say. And it was my first main podcast, and that's under podcast. It's my biggest podcast. Just type in BattlePod, and you can also type in Der dicke Preuße, but I think BattlePod will do it.
Rock on. Thank you very much, good sir, for your time.
Hope to make a new episode with you, your host, and my co-host.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. The massive naval autocannon 40 weighs as much as 150 Spider light mechs and must be assembled in null G. This behemoth can launch an 800-kilogram shell with such power that if you lined up 22 Spiders in a row, it could core straight through all of them. A McKenna-class warship carries 12 naval AC-40s. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I'm excited to be joined by the amazing Derek from On the Origins of BattleMechs and Armor Up. Thank you for joining me, Derek.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
I am truly graced by your presence, for you are a master of the BattleTech podcast. You've been doing this for such a long time. How long have you guys been active?
So the podcast itself has been active since, if I remember correctly, 2020. Because they went live while I was when I just got stationed in Korea. So that would be 2020, and then I joined the podcast in 2021. I did an episode, the Victor episode. I actually was on as a guest host, and then took over as a full host that next year. So in 2021, yep. And then from there, been with them ever since. So
Sweet. And how many episodes are you at again right now?
combined, I believe it's somewhere around 150, 160 episodes between the two podcasts that we do.
150 episodes. So if listeners, you're listening and you're looking for a BattleTech podcast, and for some reason you haven't heard of On the Origins, there you go. You have 150 episodes of content. It's pretty sick. So I have to know, what's the story behind your name for both podcasts? I know you mentioned that you're only a guest on Armor Up, but I know you said you can speak to it, so we'll apologize to Chandler in advance. Chandler, gomenasai. Thank you for letting us have Derek speak on your behalf on this episode. But what's the story behind the names?
So on the origin, the original, at least how I understand it, because again, I joined a little bit late. It was basically, how can we do a podcast where we look at the mechs themselves? Because you already got people like Wolfnet who do news, gaming coverage, that kind of thing. Same with MechBay and a couple of the other guys who were around at the time. So our goal was, well, there's people who do lore, there's people who do news and gaming. What about people that just solely focus on the BattleMech side of things? We kind of took a little, from what I understand, we took a little bit of inspiration from the Tex Talks videos, but we're like, hey, let's go even more in depth and just basically start from the Mackie and go all the way up. So we've been slowly working our way through that. I think right now we finally reached just before the American Civil War. So we're not even all the way there yet. We haven't even touched the clans, which I know all of us are pretty excited to get to eventually. And then with Armor Up, what it was is, well, we're talking the BattleMechs. So let's talk. So Chandler and Brute, Mario, he's huge on tanks. If you've been in the Alpha Strike Wolfnet 350 scene, he's the guy who's tormented so many people with tank army lists and Hell's Horses tank army lists at that. So they decided, hey, let's do another podcast that's focused solely on tanks, VTOLs, that kind of stuff. The unsung heroes of BattleTech, the guys who are really in the trenches and aren't getting the glory like the Mech does. So they've basically adapted a similar format going from the beginning. So I believe one of the first tanks they talked about was the Merkava, from the one the Mackie stomped on during its first test trials, and then have been working their way up. I was on two of the beginning episodes. One obviously focused on a Davian tank because I'm a big Davian man, and then I think it was a Lyran tank because I just love the look of it and asked to be on it, and I just happened to be there while they were recording. So like, hey, we're doing a double header recording session. You wanna just jump in on this one too? And I was like, cool, I can do that. So, but yeah, no, our whole thing is basically treating it like an educational classroom where we're teaching you about the mech and just talking through it and just going down, hey, this is what we see on this mech. These are kind of what we see as some of the downsides, some of the upsides, that kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun.
On the topic of it being educational, is On the Origins of BattleMechs, is that a play on Darwin's On the Origins of Species?
Yes, if you actually look at our logo, it's like what is it? It's that little like dog robot from a few years ago, and it just shows them getting bigger and bigger. I think it goes up to the Mackie and maybe an Atlas. Honestly, I have to look at the logo, but yeah, no, it is definitely a play on the Origin of Species, so On the Origin of BattleMechs.
Very cool. Do we know about Armor Up? I feel like, I don't know, like what pops in my mind is like Power Up or something like that.
I think it just had to do with tanks being heavily armored, that kind of thing. It was just, hey, let's see what we can do with that. We've also thrown around ideas for looking at aerospace as well and doing a separate show for that, but that's still kind of in the.
I'd love to see that.
Yeah, I'm a big aerotech fan. I just love the thought of aerospace and space combat. That's always been one of my driving factors in sci-fi. Mechs are great, but I like big things in orbit that throw nukes around like they're candy. We've definitely been looking at doing something like that, so hopefully we'll see that in the future, but it might be a while.
Very cool. So you sort of touched on it as well, but is there a specific aim you have of what you want to bring to the community with your podcasts?
I think the biggest thing for us is highlighting the different mechs, different vehicles that are available, because the universe is so expansive, and you get like the games like Mech Warrior 5, the more recent stuff we'll go into is Mech Warrior 5, Mech Warrior Online, HBS BattleTech, where it's solely focused on a small group of mechs, the classics that you see from the 3025 era, at least in HBS BattleTech, and then Mech Warrior 5, and then the highlights of the clan invasion with the classic Intersphere mechs, and then the well-known classic clan mechs. So, those are the ones that people see a lot of. I think some of the older games definitely did a better job of highlighting some of the earlier mechs, or some of the other mechs like the Templar and the Hauptmann. I have fond memories of Mech Warrior 4 Mercenaries rolling around in a decked out Hauptmann and decked out Templar. I probably gained that. I think that's where I gained my love of House Davian, was from that, smiting the evil Steiners. Probably gonna get some controversial comments for that, but I'll deal with it.
The best Steiners.
I'll
give you the controversial comment right here. Catherine Steiner's the best.
Well,
there you go.
The Lyrans ruined the FedCom. I'm just saying it right now. It wasn't us who broke the Federated Commonwealth. It was you. We were all for it. But anyway.
Who needs a federated Commonwealth? We need a dictator to rule everything. Catherine, she saw it. She had the vision and the compassion to push it through.
Yeah, compassion. We'll call it that.
Compassion, with air quotes.
But yeah, I think the big aim is to just be able to highlight all the mechs that are out there. Like some of these mechs that I've seen, I would have never known about had we not been doing the show and researching things. Like I didn't know what a battle axe was for the longest time. I didn't know what a Ymir was or an Icarus 2. I mean, now I do, but and the proliferation pack probably would have helped me, but it definitely sold me a bit more on the proliferation pack because I'm like, I know what all those mechs are, and that's cool. And getting my Davian battle axe in plastic was pretty awesome. So I think the biggest thing is just bringing people to be able to see how expansive the universe is and how many different mechs there are, as well as how many different variants there are. It's basically the sky's the limit with a lot of this stuff. Like, what do you want to do and what do you want to have? Like, there is probably some sort of mech that you're going to look at and be like, I love that thing. Might not be great. It might be terrible, but you're going to love it nonetheless.
Awesome. So, once again, sort of, we're touching on this. Is there anything that you think makes your podcast special or unique in the community? Obviously, your offering's very different, but is there anything outside the offering that you think makes you extra thumbs uppy?
I mean, I think it just comes back to our format is a lot different, where it's very focused, laser focused on, hey, we are talking about this mech. I mean, that's not to say that we haven't had some inside jokes. We did create a sticker for Gen Con that is and an emotional support laser, because we jokingly refer to small lasers, the random small lasers you keep finding on mechs to be emotional support lasers.
That makes sense.
I think it's just kind of the classroom element to it, the very laser focused, hey, this is what we're talking about, and this is all we're talking about. And then the fact that we can get guest hosts from all over the community to just come on and talk passionately about why they love this thing. Why, we had the Wolfnet guys on for the Marauder episode because Andrew is a huge fan of the Marauder and just sat there and talked about it because he loved it. That is his thing. And it's great to do that. We've had, other people as well from across the community just come on and talk about their favorite mech and why it is their favorite. You can really hear like the enjoyment and passion of why they love this fictional piece of art and paper that, they get to play with on a game board.
Yeah, I think that one thing that really sticks out to me about your guys' podcast is how well researched it is. Like, I think you're the most, I know you said you have an academic focus, but it definitely seems like from a lore perspective and a research perspective in general, it seems like your podcast goes deeper than anybody else's podcast, which I think is pretty impressive because you're always dropping those references. Yeah, drop those reference bombs. You want to challenge me, bro? I got a reference.
I think the thing is we also, some of what we look at the BattleMechs for is it's not necessarily what it does on the table. We look at it like how it would function in the universe too. A lot of the podcasts are solely focused on how would this mech do on the table, why this mech doesn't work on the table. But then like we look at it and we're like, hey, it might not translate to the table very well, but in a, I guess the best way to put it is realistic environment, even though a couple meters tall BattleMech is not very realistic, but whatever. It's all for fun. I think it's the fact that we look at it from that perspective and not just like, hey, this is the min-maxed way we would do it. It's more of like, well, I don't know why they would design it like that. Why would they do that? What's the thought process? And kind of being able to talk that and explain like, here's what we think the thought process is, or here's what we think this mech is best designed to do. You have a lot of people that'll see a mech, take it onto the table, and then be like, this mech is terrible. And it's like, well, how'd you use it? Well, I took this Warhammer straight into a fight with a bunch of assault mechs, like in a brawl, and it's like, well, it's got ERPPCs, my guy. It should be sitting on a hill way in the background, just tossing ERPPCs and making itself scarce when somebody turns its way. And that's at least the take I've tried to do on this is, hey, how would this function in a unit? I think a lot of people also focus on, because how BattleTech is, the game itself is designed, is you can take a bunch of random mechs, throw them on the table and go, let's go, let's have a great time. But I also think doesn't always highlight the mech. It sometimes degrades the mech, and you get this opinion of, well, that battle axe is terrible because it doesn't have this or doesn't do that. But it's like, well, is it the battle axe's fault or is it how you use the battle axe? Like, battle axe design is more of a fire support platform for a heavy lance or an assault lance, where it's not really trying to get right next to you and punch you. It's trying to sit back a little ways and just be like, I'm happily throwing PPCs till you go away, and then my buddies make you go away. So
yeah, it makes sense. And I think on the topic of you saying, some things don't necessarily work on the tabletop, one thing that I've really found is that when people come at the game from that perspective, they also come at it from a certain rule-based perspective as well. As soon as you change the rule base, it changes viability. So there's so many variables. So I think looking at it from any perspective, from within a certain rule base, from looking at it theoretical in a real world scenario, like they all have value. I think it's about being open to that.
All I was going to say is, like, in our latest episode where we talked about the Panther, which got repetitive really quick, because it's like, it's a Panther. It's a Panther with a large laser. It's a new Panther with a PPC with a slight change here. But a lot of that, we were looking at it and we kind of trying to make it interesting, looked at it like, well, what era was it being built in? So you got some of these Panthers that are being designed post clan invasion, where you can tell the Draconis Combine is just trying to throw something quote unquote decent that they can mass produce at the clans, which is, slap some newfangled tech onto this thing and throw it into the front lines. Good luck, kids. Try not to get killed, or, die honorably for the dragon and take as many with you as you can. However you want to look at it, I guess. But then you get to Jihad and you get to see some of those Panther designs where, like, you can definitely tell that they are doing very much the similar, newer tech, but similar thought process of how can I mass produce I think the Blakeists have a Panther. That basically our thought process on it when we were looking at it was, it looked more like, hey, how can the Blakeists pump out Panthers with new tech, or new-ish tech, quote unquote, air quotes, toss that thing into the front lines with their protectorate troops? Because obviously, I mean, as if anybody's read some of the Jihad source books, they didn't really care about those protectorate troops too much. They kind of just threw them into the fire and, maybe dropped a nuke on them occasionally because they're expendable. But, like, you could definitely tell with some of the designs where it was like, this is a cheap, mass-produced piece of equipment to throw into the grinder to try and, grind down Stone's coalition or whoever they were facing at the time, or just to equip their military. So it's kind of cool seeing that in the designs and looking at it from that perspective. You can kind of see, like, the era, and then why do you think during that era, like Jihad, a lot of the Jihad designs are all very similar. They are all very much just toss something together and throw it out the factory door because we just need something to go into the front line. It might not be great. The pilot's life expectancy might be very, very low. But, if they live, they live. If they die, they die. Kind of the Ivan Drago from Rocky. If he dies, he dies.
I don't know if you play with the pilot cards ever, but in our games we do, and the Panther actually has the fist fire ability on one of his pilots. And the fist fire, that's terrifying in a Panther.
I actually haven't played with any of the pilot cards, so that's interesting to know. I have to try and convince some of my local guys to do that, just so I can bring a Panther and do that.
Yeah, man, just a 1/6 chance to pop someone's head. It's nasty. You don't get close to that thing, yeah. It's interesting. It's sort of cool, right? Because then it enforces his sniper role, and as soon as people get too close, he's too slow really to run away, right? So then get in there, punch him in the face, and teach him a lesson the hard way.
Yeah, teach him why he shouldn't have let you get that close.
Exactly. All right, so I got to ask you, do you have a favorite BattleTech bungle?
There's been a couple, because I will admit I am actually fairly new to playing the tabletop. I came from the video game and novel side of things and have slowly been pulled deeper and deeper into the glorious abyss that is the tabletop plastic side, where I own way too much plastic now because of that. We won't talk about how many battalions of Davian guards I actually own at this point. 3 years and I've built up almost a regiment of guards. Yeah, I'm glad my wife's out of earshot for that one. Anyway, but I think BattleTech bungle would be this weekend at Gen Con, actually. It was one of those bungles where I didn't realize what the rules said because we hadn't played with it, and I probably should have read the packet a little bit better, because afterwards the Wolfnet guys kind of pointed out, like, it's in the packet, my guy. It says this. It's like, didn't you read that? And I looked at them and I was like, it was non-standard infantry cover. So I deployed myself in a manner that didn't really help me and help my enemy just kind of swarm my poor Masakari with so many back shots and Alpha Strike. And he kind of died a warrior's death, because I didn't realize that non-standard infantry cover gives a +3 to the infantry hiding behind a vehicle. And then so it makes them very, very hard to hit. And it didn't go well for me, just because I didn't know that, or I didn't realize that because I failed to read the rules properly. So obviously I had a very, very interesting learning experience, but it was a lot of fun nonetheless.
At least the Masakari pilot was probably happy to die. No, wait, getting killed by infantry? Dishonorable!
No, he actually died to mechs, so mechs and
there you go,
vehicles
perfect.
blasting him down. Plus I was playing Waco Rangers, so, winning isn't exactly what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to kill everybody. Do the most damage as possible, because I was playing Waco Rangers on Outreach for my list, so more Waco's Horde than Rangers. But it was a lot of fun. Was handing out Waco Ranger patches that I had custom made with Death to Dragoons written on them. So the Wolfnet guys were obviously very happy, as they are huge Dragoons fans. They were all smiles to see that. But I thought it was fun. So I got to play my Colonel Wayne Waco and his Rangers, and it was a blast. But learning non-standard infantry cover was an interesting learning experience that I will probably introduce to my local community now that I know. And be
Nice.
like, here's this, and have people look at me in probably abject horror, feeling like, wait, what? And I'd be like, yeah.
Yeah. Now it's your turn to learn. You'll never forget this lesson.
Pretty much.
Cool. All right. So now I have a question that I need to know, because you are the person that can answer this. If anyone in the world can answer this question, it's you. And therefore, the pressure is on, good sir. What is the worst mech?
Jaeger Mech. Jaeger Mech.
No!
I know, it's the quintessential Davian mech, and everybody cannot understand why I despise the Jaeger mech. I'd rather have a rifleman, plus the rifleman just looks cooler.
You don't like the Jaeger mech potbelly?
No. To quote one of my friends from Korea who I taught to play, he called it the assault Irby, because that's just what he thought when he was looking at the photos of Gen Con. He's like, what is this urban mech? I'm like, no, that's a Jaeger mech. He's like, assault urban mech. I was like,
Assault
sure, why
urban
not? But I guess to justify it's one of those mechs where you look at it, and in the lore, how it's written is that it's supposed to be the replacement to the rifleman, where it's like, hey, the rifleman had I believe it was some heat issues, but I feel like when they designed it, in universe at least, they tried to correct all the issues, but like didn't improve it or made it worse, kind of thing, in other ways. Yes, I know the Jaeger mech is renowned for its paper thin armor in some cases, but so is the Jaeger mech. I just feel like the Jaeger mech in general is the worst version of the rifleman. Is basically somebody looked at the rifleman and was like, this is good, but we can make better, and did not make better. They just made mediocre. And then it got sadly associated with my favorite faction, and now everybody looks at me and's like, you love the Jaeger mech, right? I'm like, no, I don't. And they get very sad. Jaeger mech 3, on the other hand, I'm down with that, because it was redesigned for Davian Bride. I just think that every version of the Jaeger mech I look at, it's got a couple that are decent, but nothing that really, like, I want to take this mech and throw it on the table and play with it. There's just nothing about it that speaks to me. And most mechs usually have 1 or 2 variants where I'm like, I want to try that. I think I could do something fun and crazy with it. But then I look at the Jaeger mech and I just look at it with disdain and disappointment and be like, how are you associated with my beloved Federated Sons? Like, go back to your corner and think about what you've done.
Okay, you are playing a classic BattleTech game, and you get to start either with a Jaeger mech or a rifleman that has already lost 1 arm. Who do you choose?
The rifleman. I'll take my chances.
Okay, it's lost an arm, both of its legs are only internals, and it has a foot actuator damage.
Rifleman.
Okay, now it's the same mech. This is now a role-playing game. You have your personal character in this game, and the cockpit system, the ejection system on the rifleman is faulty, and has a 50% chance to kill you on ejection. Rifleman or Jaeger mech?
Rifleman.
Oh my god!
I will take my chances.
The
I will
hatred
roll those
is
dice.
real. Okay, well, you're committed, good sir. I can understand your statement. I've always thought Jaeger mech is funny because of the pot belly. I just think the pot belly design is so hilarious. If you put a trucker hat on him, man, oh, it's perfect.
I think that's also where some of my disdain for it is just the artwork, where the Jaeger mech looks, especially, or not the Jaeger mech, the rifleman, especially the new design, the plastic model just makes it look crisp. But then, like, I got to see the one at Gen Con this weekend, and I just kind of looked at it and I was like, you are still shame. Just walked away, and it's just like, yeah, I have no interest in you.
You
Like,
can't
someone-
trick me, artist.
I think it was Chandler who was standing next to me. He's like, oh, look, it's the Jaeger mech. I was like, I don't care. And went and was like, ooh, look, it's a Devastator. And was just like, that interests me. Oh, it's a Caesar. And he's just like, but the Jaeger mech. And I'm like, no, we don't care. It just, it can sit there and wish that it had my attention.
Have you guys done the Jaeger mech in episode on him yet?
No, we haven't. We haven't gotten there yet. We're getting there, but not there just yet, because we're at the Panther. So we'll be there shortly.
Well, I'm excited to hear your thoughts on that episode in more detail. Let the hatred flow.
There will be a lot. There will probably be quite a bit.
So if people haven't heard about your podcast before, haven't listened to you yet, where can they find you to listen to you?
You can find us on Apple. You can find us on Podbean. You can find us on YouTube. We're slowly but surely converting our entire catalog over to YouTube. It's been a passion project for Brent, but it's just taking time because there is a lot of episodes and a lot of content to get through. But yeah, we're slowly but surely doing that. So you basically any major podcast service, you can find us there.
And so if they search on the Origins of BattleMechs, they'll also be able to find Armor Up in your channel? Or can they search Armor Up as well? Would it find?
It might. I usually, if I'm gonna search anything on the Origins, because we just post them jointly in the same channel, it just makes it easier for us to upload them with one account rather than multiple. And plus we edit them together and stuff like that. So it just kind of makes it easy. I know on Apple it's set up so you can do season 1, season 2. Season 1 is all of on the Origins, season 2 is all of our Tonks and Armor Up stuff.
Sweet. Well, that's awesome. So thank you so much for being here today and humbling BungleTech by the masters being willing to appear on our show. So I really appreciate your time. And if anyone hasn't checked out On the Origins of BattleMechs yet, it's really interesting, very academic in nature, very well researched, and very fun. Just look in there and find your favorite mech. I started with the Locust, for example. I'm like, oh, I want to know about the Locust. And then sort of started picking it off from there. But yeah, really, really great content with lots of unique perspectives in there. And make sure to check out the future Jaeger Mech episode because that's going to be really good. I can tell.
Yeah, just like you said, every time people talk to me about the podcast and listening to it, I always just find something you're interested in. You don't have to start from the beginning. Some of my local guys did, and they're like slowly but surely working their way through. And it's like you can just listen to what you want to listen to, and you don't have to do it, one episode at a time. It's just whatever you want to listen to. We have no real like, hey, this is the order you should listen to the podcast. It's more along the lines of, hey, just pick an episode, listen to that. If you enjoy it, go find the next one that you want to listen to and just jump around. That's what I do with a lot of podcasts. And before I took on the hosting responsibilities, that's what I did is I'd see some episodes about some mechs where I'm just like, I don't really care and jump on to the next one. But yeah, it's been a pleasure getting to sit down and talk.
Awesome, man. Well, I hopefully will talk with you soon. Thanks for your time, and thanks for making such great content.
Thank you.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. The world of Jeanette 3 is one of deep conflict for its citizens. With over 90% of the population identifying as Buddhist, most people enjoy the remote location for its peaceful atmosphere and distance from sphere affairs. It is also the home of the Jeanette Naval Yards, the single largest employer on the world, and which is responsible for producing the majority of submersible attack vessels fielded by the Draconis Combine. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody. We are back, and I'm super, super stoked because I am joined by Dustin from the MechBay podcast. Dustin, thank you for being here.
Glad to be here. Glad to talk to the community at large. BattleTech is big. It's spread out and all the way out to Canada and beyond.
To Canada and beyond.
Yeah, and I always enjoy hearing from other folks that are, creating content for the community to consume. So thanks for having me on.
Well, funnily enough, I don't know if I've mentioned this to anyone in the MechBay yet, but the MechBay is actually one of my chief inspirations for creating this podcast. I had essentially 3 inspirations when I was creating BungleTech, and the MechBay was a specific podcast that inspired me. I was like, oh my God, I really like this content. I want to create my own content. I think one thing that I really liked about the MechBay was the vibe. The vibe that you guys had was like, oh, this is a really good vibe, and I feel like I can bring a unique vibe to the podcast community as well. So thank you for the inspiration, good sir.
Yeah, no problem. I'm once again honored and flattered. We were similarly inspired by Wolfnet and a lot of other podcasts like Tex and many other people that were creating content. And I guess I took a peek at your questions you were going to ask, and maybe we could get into that because the origins of the podcast was something you were going to ask about. We wanted to cover, and by we, I mean mostly Josh. Like, let me be clear. He started the MechBay podcast, and he had like set down the original guiding principles which is an important thing, I think, for any organization that's going to create anything, is you look back and look upon your touchstone, your guiding principles, and be like, what is it that we do or whatever? And what we wanted to do was kind of focus on the tabletop. Now, that was a while back. So as far as answering your question, where did the name come from, right? The MechBay podcast.
Mm-hmm.
It has been a long time, and I frankly don't really remember. So I don't have a great answer for that. I remember we did throw a couple things around, but something with the, a MechBay or the MechBay, I feel like that was very early on, and if memory serves, not iterated on too much. We kind of threw a couple things around, or, is there going to be a space between Mech and Bay, which I continue to forget whether or not there is a space between Mech and Bay in the MechBay podcast.
Well, it's funny because, like, I think if you called it a MechBay podcast, it would almost undersell it a little bit.
Right.
Maybe you started out and you were just a MechBay podcast.
Yeah, we were.
But over the years, you've now become the MechBay podcast.
I'm trying to remember what Josh throws it down every episode. It's part of his we all have our scripts and stuff that we read off or whatever, but yeah, your number one source or something like that to improve your mech in your game.
Oh, yeah,
Something
yeah,
like that.
yeah.
Yeah.
We help you fix your mech and your game.
And your game.
Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's where the MechBay came from, and it's like fixing the mech in the game. And yeah, and that's mostly where the name came from. So nothing too crazy there. No big story, unfortunately, for the name of the podcast. At least for me.
Well, that sort of goes into your mission statement, right? Like, what does your podcast aim to bring to the community?
Yeah, we definitely want to share our experience with the tactical tabletop, the playing of the game. There are, and I love them endlessly, but there is no shortage of other content creators who are covering the lore and the history and the mechs themselves, because we all love our stompy robots and all the variants of them. When I'm bored at work, I'll listen to people talk about their favorite mechs, and they're just other people doing that and doing it better than we would be doing it. So we wanted to, that's the niche we thought we would carve out for ourselves, or at least, Josh thought we could carve out. Other people talk about playing the game, don't get me wrong, but talking almost specifically or centering the focus of the podcast around the tactics on the tabletop and discussing strategy and stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. So how long have you been doing the podcast for?
Oh boy. Without pulling out the date of our first episode, I want to say we were pre-pandemic or just at the beginning of the pandemic when we thought it wasn't going to be a big deal. And so I think that's around late 2019 or early 2020 that we started up.
Yeah, I think that sounds about right. I think like 2 or 3-ish years from my understanding.
Yeah, so we've been on it for quite a while now. I think we shoot for an episode every 2 weeks, and we don't always hit that. We're on like 56 episodes, and there's Christmas and usually sometime in the summer, there's usually a missed episode. The holidays are a given. It's just difficult, as you know, to get everybody together.
Mm-hmm.
But so yeah, 56, we probably do 20 episodes a year. Does that add up? Yeah, about 20 episodes a year. So yeah, 2.5, 3 years, something like that.
An episode every 2 weeks is very aggressive.
Very.
That's a lot of work.
Yeah. And we definitely don't always hit that, which is, it is what it is. Our people start clamoring, I got to do my yard work. When's the new episode coming out? Like, all right, you know who you are.
I got to do my yard work. Give me an episode so my mind does not rot during this 2-hour period.
Right.
That's funny. So you already mentioned, your podcast is really focused on the strategic perspective. And I've actually, taken lessons from your podcast 100%. For example,
oh, excellent.
One thing that immediately comes to mind is smoke LRMs on...
That's why you're losing all the time, right?
No, I can't blame losing on you guys. It's definitely all on my unique narrative style of playing BattleTech. The rule of cool, not the rule of good. Yeah. You guys really do build effective and look at lances from an effective perspective. Mm-hmm. My perspective is a little bit leaned on. I just want to think of it from the pilot's perspective. I think of it from the what would be cool to try. Yeah. And then if I get blown up, I get blown off. I don't really do competitive BattleTech, right. Although I definitely appreciate it.
Mhm.
And I have competed in battles, like I've gone to events, but man, do I just get squashed. But then, but the great thing about it is then I can be like, well, it's because you're not playing with advanced rules. If you were
Yeah.
playing with advanced rules, I'd be winning.
Yeah.
You just all play with basic rules. What is this, beginner's hour? So that's the excuse I can use.
There you go. There you go. Yeah, you and Denim would get along. I feel like I have our three personalities. You have Josh. He's definitely in it to win it, or at least be on the journey to win it. And then you got Denim, who's, trying to Dungeons and Dragons BattleTech. And you got me. I think I fit somewhere in the middle there on the spectrum. But I did interrupt you with you were talking about smoke LRMs. I didn't know if you want to circle back.
Well, basically, you talked about the grasshopper, the stupid LRM5 that no one wants to use. And all of a sudden, you're like, just chuck smoke LRMs on the LRM5. And I'm like, oh my God. Yes, all of a sudden, LRM5s are viable. They're useful.
Yes.
So that little, like, 'cause I love the grasshopper, but I'd always when I play on the BattleTech harebrained schemes or whatever, I just remove the LRM5. I'm like, this is useless. Let's just lean on the lasers. Now that I have this perspective on the tabletop, yeah, definitely. It's just opened things up. And man, I love smoke LRMs. I don't care how much they slow the game down. You will sift through my smoke as I sift through the rules.
That's right. Excellent.
So, yeah, so focus on the strategic perspective. Obviously, everyone in your show has a slightly different perspective, but what do you feel really makes your podcast special or unique?
Yeah, I think what makes our podcast special is our dedication to our schedule, which is not perfect, but I feel like it's okay. Definitely our focus on the tactics, but we already talked about that. And I think it's our vibe too. Not to overuse the word vibe like we all do these days, but Denim, Josh, and I are all locals. We all hang out, we all roll the dice together. And I think that makes us our recordings at least unique in that way, not that nobody else has a friendly vibe going on. And then I also think that we're plugged into our community, which especially Denim has created such an incredible community in the triangle. I'm not sure why North Carolina seems to be such a hot spot of BattleTech, but between Rob at Fortress Miniatures and Games hosting his incredible Alpha Strike tournament, I'm hoping for a really good full turnout of 32 players at my classic tournament this year. And Denim frequently hosts, upwards of mid 40s for people in the Dungeons and Dragons style, one mech against the game master style tables that he runs. So we have our vibe and we have our focus on what we're doing. And then we have games on the table, which there's no substitution for the context that brings. So and I think that's what makes us unique and our combination of all those things.
Think that as well, that on the topic of community, or your Discord community is really well developed as well. And it seems to be, from my perspective, one of the most active Discord communities for BattleTech.
It's interesting. I didn't see this coming up in the conversation, but I used to be a moderator on an older, and it's still operating, and it's still a great BattleTech Discord, but I used to be a moderator in there. I guess I still technically am. I'm waiting for the guys to kick me out because I don't do any work over there anymore.
Kick you out? Do they know who you are?
I guess they do know, but I'm never there. But that brought a lot of experience, and they were the Discord that I found when I was getting into BattleTech in 2018. And so they scooped me up into their loving embrace and answered my beginners questions. I don't want to call them dumb questions. There's no dumb beginner questions. We all have to get in there, and how you roll LRMs can be confusing at first glance. How especially with the cluster table being kind of maybe other people who came from a background of wargaming had a better a grasp on that. But some of those things seem kind of arbitrary, or in their remnants of the game being from 1984 or whatever. So I had some experience in that respect for moderating a Discord, and more importantly, kind of how to keep it from going off, just flying off the rails. Because it can happen. It can happen. So
Oh, 100%.
yeah, so just keeping that and the hobby page, hobby progress is so great. Keep us all inspired and encouraging each other to slay the gray, to steal a saying from some painting YouTubers I follow.
Slay the gray.
Yeah, slay
Oh,
the
that's
gray.
funny.
Yeah.
Oh, man. My gray is thriving. I have like a sanctuary of gray right now.
That's my goal this year, is to buy less and paint more, and I'm almost done with all my Necron backlog. It's just about there. And then I've got my BattleTech minis. Furiously, I'm preparing for Southern Assault 3 and trying to get through that backlog. And I think BattleTech's a little different because your backlog is your list building reservoir
Mhm.
because there's no super distinct factions. So
Yeah.
I'll never get through all of my BattleTech backlog, but we're getting there. We're getting there. But yeah, that keeps the community together. We keep the content coming. We can discuss with the community our episodes, and we try to keep our egos out of the way. And I think that helps keep the Discord healthy and positive and fun. And most importantly, a fun place to be.
Mhm. Yeah, very cool. So, obviously the theme of BungleTech is mistakes. So I have to ask you this question.
Oh yeah.
So, what is your favorite or most memorable BattleTech bungle?
Oh, this one's easy. I ran a Wolverine for an entire game with I think 4 people, including myself. It was at the local game store. I was running a game. People would stop by, and before I had my second child, I was really active. I was at the local game store every week, and I would just pull people in. If you stopped by my table, I was asking you if you wanted to take a record sheet and roll dice. Like, I was that guy. I was like, "Oh yeah, it's BattleTech. Cool, man. Here's a mech. Here's some dice. I'll show you how to play the game." And I've been playing with a new guy. I've been playing with some people I know. We get through most of the game, and I look at my Wolverine that I've been jumping around the table, and I have taken the variant that does not have jump jets. So I have been very illegally playing my battle mech for the entirety of the game, jumping behind people, getting those back shots in, and my face just went flush. And I'm like, I'm so sorry. But, because everybody's like, the Wolverine has jump jets. It does. Well, not all of them do. So that was I think my favorite BattleTech bungle for sure. Humiliating in the moment, but I can look back and laugh.
How many new players did you have at the table at that time that you
I got 1 or
treacherously
2.
backstabbed? Ooh, backstabbed 2 new players in a game. That's an accomplishment.
It really is. Yeah.
Now get out of my hobby store, you chump. You
That's
should have
right.
read the rule book. You should have looked at my record sheet.
That's right. That's at the end of the day, it's actually your fault because you're supposed to look at your opponent's record sheets. It's
And
not
then
my
and then
fault.
if they did try, you actually play with hidden information. So
There you go.
sorry.
There you go.
There's always an angle, man.
There's always a way to be right.
And always a way to be wrong.
I think that's part of the social contract, right? Is be sure to always win the argument, always be right.
Yes, always be right, regardless of what you have to burn down.
That's right.
Nerd question for you. We're all nerds here. We're both nerds, right? We can use that word. We're comfortable with it.
Oh, definitely. This is a safe place for nerds.
If you had the power to retcon one thing in the BattleTech universe, what would it be and why?
So I'll kind of let you be the judge of this, whether or not this is a retcon. Because I mean, you have to retroactively. What is retcon even short for? Retroactive correction or something? The con.
Yeah, it's an abbreviation like that, but basically it means like to go back and change something.
Right. I think. Yeah, and usually retconning happens to fix something. So it depends on your interpretation of precisely what a retcon is. Because my first retcon is that the Falcons should win the battle for Terra.
Oh.
But I don't necessarily know that that's a retcon. So if you don't want me to roll with that,
No, that's a
one,
retcon.
I do
That's
have
a
a different.
retcon.
That's a retcon.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I have a pretty simple reason, and it's just that everybody knew the Wolves were going to win, and it would have been so much more exciting in the moment if the Falcons pulled the win, and I feel like it would have set up a more antagonistic Ill Clan era perhaps, with Malvina running the inner sphere instead of, or at least being the Ilkhan instead of Alaric being the Ilkhan. But that would be my retcon. I want that. I wanted that to be different from the start. I still want it to be different, and we get what we get, and that's what I got to roll with. But that would be my retcon.
And this is coming from someone who your Discord icon is a Clan Wolf icon.
That's right. I like playing the underdog too.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you're a Clan Wolf fanboy yourself, but you think that this story would have been more interesting with Jade Falcon taking the reins.
Yeah, I really do. It would have been just more interesting because I feel like and now I have to play devil's advocate with myself. Perhaps if the Falcons won, the inner sphere would be too scared and too ready to come together to defeat the Falcons or at least limit their spread. Whereas with Alaric in charge, maybe he's not as threatening to the inner sphere. So maybe they'll be because what we want in our universe is lots of skirmishing on the edges. We want constant conflict. We want the space opera politics. So maybe getting the Avengers together, the inner sphere Avengers to contain the evil, the mustache twirling Malvina Hazen or Hazan, however you want to say it, would have been less interesting. But I wanted to be surprised. I wanted BattleTech to kill its darling a little bit, and not necessarily completely kill. I think you completely murdering off a faction isn't the best idea, especially for those poor people who painted Oberon Confederation mechs. Even though, is the Oberon Confederation coming back in some form? Either way, if a faction has been killed off, I feel like there's been an effort to bring it back. So maybe not the best thing to do, but at least to have them be defeated for sure.
Very, very cool. Well, people that are part of the BattleTech community and are listening to this and that have the power to make this change, make sure to do it.
Yeah.
Do it for Dustin. Do it for the MechBay, or else he will inflict his wrath upon you. I can say that, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's what you're planning to do, right?
I will issue my bachals.
Sweet. Well, dude, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you being here and your time and everything. Truly an honor to have you here.
Thanks for having me on.
No worries. If people somehow didn't know about the MechBay and wanted to find out more about the MechBay, how can they find you?
You can type the MechBay podcast into your favorite search engine. Find us on just about any podcast listening platform. You can send us an email at themechbaypodcast@gmail.com. You can also hit us up on Facebook at the MechBay Podcast. And we have a lovely little Discord. Not entirely sure how you'd get the invite to the Discord. It's definitely on the Facebook page, but it's an open Discord. You can find your way onto the Discord. And I think those are all the places. Oh, we do also have an Instagram, the MechBay Podcast on Instagram. You can find a couple photos of our hobby antics on that social media platform. I believe those are all the ways that you can see what kind of stuff, what kind of refuse we're pumping out into the community.
Rock on. Well, keep pumping it out, man.
Thanks.
The community's addicted to it. The refuse, as you say.
And I've been enjoying your podcast as well. Keep it up. Your technique for bringing 3 players into a game in an interesting way has been an inspiration, and I know that I'll try it out the next time that odd man out wants to roll dice, or when you're lining up the game, setting up the 3 differing objectives.
Yeah, man. That's a fun game mode.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, no, I've been enjoying the narrative stuff that you're cooking up, 100%.
Awesome. Well, that means the world because, like I said, you're one of the chief inspirations. So technically, it's really you're patting yourself on the back.
All right.
Because
So people are going to start
puking.
Thanks
to you. Okay. Well, this has been awesome.
All right. Well, thanks for having me on.
Thank you for everything, and I'm excited to listen to more episodes of the MechBay.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. During development of House Kurita's Raiden battle armor, the 70-year-old project director, Dr. Guthrie, was ordered to pilot it during its first live-fire test. The suit survived a hail of laser and ballistic fire, leaving Guthrie still able to salute coordinator Takashi Kurita before collapsing and being taken to the hospital so that he might recover from his 5 broken bones. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm joined by the amazing Heather from Battle Babes. Hello, Heather. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm super excited. I know it's taken a little bit of time to get this going, but woohoo!
Woohoo is right. So, for people that don't know about your podcast, how long have you been active for?
I've been doing some podcast stuff for the Calgary BattleTech League for about 2 years now. And then last year, myself and the other female in our league kind of got suckered into being the interviewers for our league. And then it just kind of snowballed from there. So our actual podcast, Battle Babes, has been about just over a year, I guess, or well, no, maybe under a year, something like that.
Very cool. So I have to ask, what's the story behind your name? Is it as straightforward as it seems?
So, yes, it is. Well, yes, and kind of no. So we were trying to figure out a name because we started doing the interviews for League, and I just didn't want to be Heather and Laura. And then we started talking about doing some reading and doing the podcasts for the reading. And we were trying to think of names. Well, of course, the guys came up with names that were not exactly flattering. So at one point in time, it was another BB word, but I was like, yeah, no, I'm not going to use that second one because that's not exactly appropriate. So it turned out to be Battle Babes. And when we were talking about it, Laura and I thought it was perfect because we don't want to just talk about BattleTech. We wanted to talk about just battles in general, whether it's battles we're having on our, like with our games, or if it's battles and trying to understand the BattleTech, or even just battles in general. My 10-year-old, gonna say 9, but she just turned 10 a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. She keeps wanting to do an interview with us about the battle of being a kid in today's day and age, which I'm like, okay, well, yeah, let's see what those battles are about.
Very interesting, and I can definitely relate to the battle of understanding BattleTech. Perhaps that's the truest battle of them all.
Yeah. Well, when you first see BattleTech and you look at it and you're like, yeah, that looks like the stupidest game ever. And then it takes you 15 years to finally realize, hey, I might want to actually learn some of the fluff. It's definitely been a battle for my husband.
That's awesome. So, your podcast is pretty unique in the community, but I want to ask from you directly, what are you focused on bringing to the community?
Well, when it comes to the BattleTech community, we wanted to look at, well, first of all, the novels. There's not much out there about like doing novel reviews with the novels. And so that was one of the first things we wanted to kind of bring it out there so that people could see that these books are actually really good and bring them into the universe. So kind of improve the community. And also, along with that, we wanted to start educating, as I say to Laura, me more than her, because she has way more background than I do, creating content that would help people like friends who don't have the background in Battletech so that they can understand it in layman's terms instead of the way the guys talk, which is awesome if you do have some kind of background, but the whole looking at all the technical side. So the supplementals came about specifically because I was trying to describe parts of the book to my mom, but I had to kind of explain the differences in mech sizes.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's really where it came around from, because we're like, okay, we're creating this podcast for people to learn about the books, but then they're hearing about the Wasp, or they're hearing about the Marauder or the Phoenix Hawk, and they have no idea what these things are like. And so we completely acknowledge that it's a made up universe and the math is like, it has good basis, but there's no way for us to know. So we thought, hey, let's create these and make them real life so people can actually visualize. So, like one of our podcasts about the size of them and comparing them to Danny DeVito and Peter Dinklage. I was like, exactly. Everybody knows who they are.
Oh man, that's a good way to measure it. How many Danny DeVitos is a Marauder? Do you know off the top of your head?
No, because we didn't do specific mechs. We just talked about sizes. And of course, I don't have it off the top of my head. But one of them, it was, I don't know, 8 or 9 Danny DeVitos and a few more Peter Dinklages because.
Oh man, that must have been a Wasp. That must have been a smaller mech to be only 8. I think so. 8 Danny DeVitos.
Yeah, I don't remember. That would actually require someone to have a good memory, and well, I don't have a good memory.
Well, it's a good thing you document things in a podcast, because then you don't need to have a good memory. It's documented for you.
Well, yeah, I can review it quite easily and be like, "Oh yeah, I forgot that. Oh, okay."
So you've already sort of touched upon it, but is there anything else in particular that you think makes your podcast special or unique in the BattleTech community?
One, and we've been told this by many people, the fact that we're 2 women doing it, and because there's not many women playing BattleTech, let alone talking about it. And one, we're not scripted. Like we have an idea, like we know what we're talking about. So when we specifically talking about the sizes of the mechs, we did our research. We didn't just completely ignore it, but we also we don't write down every single word we're going to say. If you were to listen to our podcast compared to the CBL podcast, the main podcast, like ours kind of go all over the place. We don't have this clear, direct line. And our lack of experience, right? We don't have this huge knowledge base, and we're learning along with the people who are listening.
Very cool. So really summarizing it, it's, it's woman-led, it's unscripted, and it's introductory focused.
Yes. Yes. I thought I would tell you. I pulled it up. Talking about the sizes or the number of Peter Dinklages for the sizes. Yes. So I said 6 or 7. So if we look at like a light mech, it's 6 Danny DeVitos or 6.7 Peter Dinklages. And then looking like the heavy, a Marauder size would be 10 Danny DeVitos or 11.11 Peter Dinklages.
Wow. That's a lot of Peter Dinklage acting power in one mech. That would be the best performed mech ever. The best performing mech ever would be that 11 Peter Dinklage mech. No mech would be better acted than that Marauder.
Yeah. Well, not just 11, 11.1.
I don't know what to do with the 0.1. That just sort of makes it Cthulian for me a little bit. Like, imagine just a foot sitting there on one of their shoulders.
Yeah, well, but I was like, you gotta like include, you can't forget that one itty bitty part because it makes the difference in height.
So I have to ask, I'm actually really curious because you sort of are introductory focused as well. We're just always bungling about. But I was wondering if there's a particular bungle that you've had, and that could be, a rule bungle, it could be a lore bungle, it could be any sort of bungle that really sticks out to you.
Are we talking about our podcast or are we talking about the game?
It can be either. It could be something pertaining to your podcast. It can be something pertaining to playing the game. Yeah, totally.
I'm going to give you both. So let's go to podcast first. When we did our explanation, kind of what like the universe is like our first original one, I'm talking about space and distance. We completely had the distance completely wrong. So talking about a light year and how far it is and so on like that. We did the math. We figured it all out. And then when we did our actual breakdown of the different factions, the two boys informed us that we were completely wrong on the number of light years and the distance between places. So I felt like a complete.
They mansplained it.
They totally did, and it worked.
It worked. Oh no.
It worked. We needed it. Like our math was bad. Like millions and billions off.
Oh well.
Not just a little bit.
I mean, in millions and billions off in the terms of the vastness of space. Is that really a big deal? I don't know.
True.
But I'm not a mathematician.
Yeah.
Michael checks my math, so.
Yeah, my math is. I used to be a math coach for teachers, but now I'm like, yeah, that was a lot more numbers than I expected. So that's the podcast side, and then BattleTech side. I've actually in the league we play in, they actually have a award called the Phoenix Hawk Memorial Award. Don't ask me the backstory on that. There's an actual full-on backstory about the name of it. But 2 out of the 3 seasons I've played in, I've earned the P-Hawk Award. And actually, the first year I got it, I was like, P-Hawk, right? It's written like that on the board. I looked at it, I'm like, oh, you mean like the Fawk Award? Because literally, that's what it is. Well, last year, I took my grasshopper and I jumped it into level 2 water and kusplush, and I flooded my back torso.
Ooh.
Yeah. It was so good that the guy I was playing against was like, what did you just do? Like, you just blew open your mech. And then everyone from across the room, what did you just do? Like, everybody was like, yeah, smart. I had no idea of the possible ramifications. I thought jumping into water would be better. Well, and then later on when I reviewed it, I'm like, oh yeah, when you jump into water, your feet go up from underneath you. So it'll be the same with them. I was like, oh my God, I was such an idiot. Thinking science.
Yeah, no, definitely water is a death trap, and I didn't realize that for a long time as well. Like the flooding compartments thing that you experienced, 100%. I did not realize that was a thing. And before I was like, ooh, I'm in a splash pond with my mech. This is so nice and relaxing. And now I'm like, stay away from water. Don't get close to the water.
Well, the worst thing is, and my husband just about shot me. We played our first game last weekend for this season, and one of my mechs, one of the first moves I did, I walked him. It walked him. I didn't even jump him or run him or anything because I know you can't run into water. But I walked into water and did the same thing. And it was only level depth 1. I was like, are you freaking kidding me? I didn't jump. But yeah. So lesson learned. Water and mechs do not mix.
Yeah, water is bad. Water is bad. Although I do want to do, and I've never done it before, I think it'd be very fun to do a complete underwater match with like the torpedo launchers and
Ooh.
stuff like that. That would definitely be an advanced game, but it would be slow and arduous and boring. Then all of a sudden, everyone would just get wiped out all of a sudden.
Totally be on board for that.
Okay, so, you have an introductory sort of level focus, but you're really ingrained in the Calgary BattleTech League, and they are the masters of this stuff. So in your opinion, not in your opinion, actually. No, this is an opinion question. This is a factual opinion. In your brain facts, what is the optimal urban mech loadout and the optimal urban mech pilot name for that loadout?
Oh, Jesus. Really? Okay. Well, first of all, I didn't really, well, and I still really don't know what the heck an urban mech is, other than that they do stuff in cities. I asked Lee yesterday, and he kind of told me, and I'm like, oh, no, I forget. I would thinking urban mech, right? Thinking my brain goes Walking Dead, like being in a city, right? I don't know why that's where it goes, but it does. And so I would think you would want, well, it's got to have speed, because if you are going to be doing something that I would be assuming you would be protecting important people like presidents or prime ministers or famous celebrities. I don't know, something like that. So you want to be quick, but you'd also have to be versatile because you never know what's coming down the road. And they'd have to have some kind of a multi-functional weapon layout, because if it's you're not going to want to. So if you have I'm thinking at a concert, if you have a really big mob, or like what happened down in Vegas when the Edmonton Elks were playing down there, I think this year, against the Vegas Knights, and they were trying to block the fans from getting too close to the arena. You don't want something that's going to kill them. People might think your city's bad. So you need to have some kind of weapons with that, maybe smoke. You're not going to want fire because that would kill them too. But then you'd need something, because if you have a mech, I'm assuming other people would have mechs. So you'd need something to be able to take them out if you have to. And a pilot name? I don't know. I've been racking my brain about this. I have no idea. I want it almost to be a kind of an absolutely ridiculous name, like Diva Donna, or I don't know, Strong Stan. I don't know. I'm not very good at names.
Strong Stan and Diva Donna.
I'll Google names for different, whatever the history or the background is.
Both those names are great.
Yeah,
Diva Donna and Strong
Arnold
Stan.
Schwarzenegger. There's a name. That's a name I would put into one of those suckers.
So what's funny about how you answer this question is that you interpreted the question as a urban mech being a mech to use in urban environments.
Yeah.
But the urban mech is actually a mech itself. So it's like a Mad Cat or an Atlas. It's an actual mech type. And the armaments that you suggested for it are the exact pretty much opposite of what it's actually built at, because the urban mech isn't actually a good urban mech. It's sort of like a joke mech, although it does have its purposes. So anyhow, that was an awesome answer, because
awesome.
You basically just said the optimal urban mech loadout is to not have an urban mech loadout. That's what you just said. And most people would agree with you. Okay.
Lee was trying to explain it to me last night, and he was explaining something about like kind of like something with a tank, and I'm like, okay, all I hear is it's in the city and people don't like them. That's really all I remember from him telling me. So
it's also a good summary.
I'm glad I'll give people a few laughs.
Piloted by Diva Donna.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, breaking up those concerts with like smoke LRMs, the non-lethal variant, yeah.
Maybe some lasers pointing in the sky.
Oh, there you go, yeah. Pew pew pew, smoke show.
Yeah, there you go. I like that.
Freaking cool. Everyone can love that.
Oh my god.
So if people haven't heard about Battle Babes and they want to check out your podcast, what's the best place they can find you?
YouTube, right on the Calgary BattleTech League YouTube page. We are really trying to get into the Spotify kind of thing, but that's taking a little bit extra time, not going as fast as we thought, but we're directly connected to the Calgary BattleTech League because we do their interviews. So if they go there, there's an actual link or actual playlist with our videos on it.
Awesome. Okay, so they search the Calgary BattleTech League on YouTube and they look for Battle Babes content.
Yeah, they can also find us on Facebook under Battle Babes. It's actually Battle Babes YYC.
Very cool. Heck yeah. Thank you for sharing the story about your podcast. I think it's very unique in the podcast landscape that we have in the BattleTech world. So I'm pretty stoked for that. And I'm very excited about the Urban Mech answer. I knew it was going to be good. I didn't think it would be that good, though. Thank you.
See, that's why I'm good unscripted. Because if it was scripted, I'd be like blah blah blah.
Very good. Well, thank you for your time today. Thank you for being here.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. Nestled in the spinward corner of Free Worlds League space, the planet Nathan is a small, rural world with little of value and no broader importance. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I am now joined with Seth White Fox from the Mercenary Star podcast. Hello, good sir. Thank you for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the invitation.
We're here to talk about your podcast and what makes it special. I think we've been around for about the same time, BungleTech and Mercenary Star. I think you're a little bit older than us. But how long have you been around for?
I launched in January of 2023, so about 7 months, going on 8. But yeah, new for this year. I've been in the community for a long time though. So
Nice. Well, you're 2 months our senior in terms of the podcast landscape. What have you learned in those 2 months? What additional 2 months of wisdom do you have that you can share with me, good sir?
ooh, 2 months extra. The only thing I could say would be maybe diversify across different platforms and capture as much audience as you can.
There we go. I'm slowly learning that lesson day by day so I can understand how that probably develops more and more after every month. That makes sense. I think it's a little bit straightforward, but what's the story behind your name?
Well, I had an idea to create content around talking about different mercenary units. And I actually got the idea while listening to one of our fellow podcasts, the Valhalla Club, in one of their interviews, and thought, it would be fun to do something that was just focused on, a unit at a time in a little bit shorter form content. And what better way to do it than highlight mercenaries? Because the Kickstarter that just launched and has been wildly successful is all about mercenaries. So it's the right time to do mercenaries. And there are literal hundreds of mercenary units in the Inner Sphere, in the Battletech universe. That was where the concept was born. And then because I've been around Battletech since the very late 80s, early 90s, and started off reading the fiction within the novels pretty early, the Grey Death Legion were, of course, front and center for the fiction. And the second book within that, the 80s cover of Mercenary Star, was always one of my favorites, and just wanted to kind of pay homage to that. It was also, the Mercenary Star represents where mercenaries go to get hired in BattleTech. So a hub of scum and villainy, if you will.
But the cool type of scum.
The cool type of scum, yes, which is the Mercenary Star, whether it's Outreach or Galatea or any other of the worlds that have been called that at any time. And so, yeah, I just thought this is a perfect name for this kind of content, and that's what I decided to go with.
Interesting. So I didn't know that. So Mercenary Star is a term for essentially the planet or location where mercenaries the planet or location that's a mercenary hub.
Absolutely.
Hot damn. I did not know that. I guess it wasn't an obvious answer to me. That's why we're doing this. Very cool.
That's right.
So you touched upon this, but what does your podcast aim to bring to the community?
Particularly, obviously, highlighting individual mercenary units in a more digestible format. So I try to keep it at an hour or under. Obviously, the further away we get from the larger, more well-known mercenary units, it's going to be a lot more short form and easy to kind of go through. But quality video and audio podcasting is kind of where I wanted to be, because I've been doing video content, whether YouTube or on Twitch with streaming. And so being able to kind of have that in both worlds, there's not a lot, if any, other Battletech podcasts that put the effort into both video and audio. And so I wanted to offer that. I thought it was something that unique that I knew how to do and that I could add to our fun universe here.
Yeah, that's very cool. And that definitely is something, extremely unique about your podcast, like you say, the visual element tied to the podcast. Do you consider your primary platform YouTube? And then from there, you sort of expand outwards? Or is that your podcast star, per se?
Yes, absolutely. The YouTube is definitely the primary mode of delivery. And then thankfully, it has become a lot easier to transition video to audio with things like Spotify podcast, because you can actually upload a complete video file and then it will convert to audio and distribute to all the platforms that you sign up for.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm curious because one of the things I think that makes your podcast unique as well is the research you do when you're reviewing these different mercenary units. I'm just curious, how long on average does it take for you to prep or prepare, do the research? I know sometimes you collaborate with other creators. For example, like in the Valhalla Club, you bring them on to talk about mercenary units they're familiar with. But what's the research time on an average episode, if I could ask?
Absolutely. It depends on the unit, because some of them have a lot more to research than others. But so far, in the 9 episodes that I've done, it's been a couple of hours approximately of scouring through the different books, source books, Sarna, web, searches for images and fan art alike, just to get anything that can represent that unit. And then I'll also try to make sure that I have as accurate as possible a list of what source books and fiction are available for each one. And so a lot of it is just searching, but it's usually 2 hours or under for each one.
I'm curious about this because you've been in the BattleTech community for a while and you've played the tabletop. You're also, embedded in the mercenary and lore sort of perspective. I gotta ask you, what your favorite or most memorable BattleTech bungle is?
Yes, absolutely. It's a tough question, because the last few years my games have been a lot more online, and it's a lot harder to bungle in MegaMech when their rules are very strict. uh, but one of the things I do remember that we did wrong with my home group for a long time was heat management. We would apply heat incorrectly, specifically with like jump jets, and how that can really add up to the heat of your mech. But yeah, I think definitely the heat management. And then when finally learning about that, then also being able to use it to your advantage, or use it effectively, has been something that definitely stuck out to me as something that a bungle that I've had to correct in my life.
Were you just doing 3 heat per jump?
Just 3 heat, no matter how
Yeah.
far you jumped.
I think that's a pretty common mistake.
I think so. But yeah, that's, it's one of those things where you play with a group of people and, you read through the rules once and then think you remember it. So, right? That's what bungles are all about.
Totally. Yeah. And like you say, that really does change the game because all of a sudden you know the heat constraints of the unit you're fighting.
Exactly.
It limits them as much as it limits you, and so I've made so many bungles that as I sort of realize, like specifically regarding jump jetting, how jump
Yes.
jetting like slowly becomes worse and worse. Like, but before like I realized all these little things like that, I'm like, clearly you should always jump jet.
You should just always jump jet. Yeah.
Yeah, but now you know one heat per hex to a minimum of 3.
Yeah.
Okay. And you can't stand into a jump jet. Oh, okay. And just like the rules stacking in my head regarding jump jetting actually forcing me to actually play this game like an actual strategy game. Oh my
Yeah. And
god.
it may have been at one time. I mean, this would have been a couple decades ago at this point. We may have even applied the penalties to everybody as opposed to maybe applied them incorrectly where, for the person who's doing the jump jetting, there's
Mhm.
one penalty, and then the person who is, you're facing against, they still only have the distance movement as a modifier. And so probably also applied that incorrectly, but I don't quite remember it at the time. So
Mega Mech is what you've been playing on, right? That's the tool you've been using for your games, or
more often since I've been back in it. I had the fortunate and unfortunate joy to get back into BattleTech when CGL launched the new box sets. They were difficult to come by. My group that I had locally, we've all kind of grown up and moved apart, and so we haven't played as much. And then, we all had that 2-year period where we didn't play with anybody publicly. So,
Mhm.
kind of slowed down my progress into getting out and playing in local game shops because some of them that I had frequented closed. So,
I see.
but there's pretty big growth within my area, which is Oklahoma. There's been a lot of growth in the BattleTech community, and we have a pretty good community now. So it's been good reconnecting with them, even just this year since I started the podcast and getting more involved.
Heck yeah. That's awesome. So, this is a special question just for you, which I am very curious about, good sir. Because,
Okay.
this is from the perspective of a mercenary. This is an interesting question, and there's many ways to interpret it. So, in your opinion, not in your opinion, no, factually,
Factually, yes.
which faction or leader should control Terra?
It's a tough question. It requires a lot of thought. I would say ideally, from a in-universe perspective, a neutral party would be someone that I feel like should, in quotes, control Terra. Comstar did it for centuries, and there wasn't the fighting around Terra as much as or fighting for Terra as much as fighting around Terra between the great houses. So I don't know. I mean, it's tough. I like the idea of a neutral party. At this point in the lore, spoiler alert, Clan Wolf has it.
Mm-hmm.
So they are considered the ill clan. But if someone comes in and takes it after another clan, perhaps it doesn't necessarily make them the ill clan. It just makes them in control of Terra.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could be Seafox if they decide to go full space AT&T and start controlling everything the way Comstar used to. They're also heavily invested in mercenaries. So I kind of have an affinity for them in that regard. If you haven't read some of the most recent short fiction coming out of the Tales of Mercenaries, what I think is what the series is called, that kind of launched alongside the Kickstarter. Yeah, it's got that. But I don't know. I mean, it's really tough, and I'm very indecisive. So, like I said, I think neutral party. I think for the story, obviously Clan Wolf controls them right now, but I kind of think it would be fun for everyone's favorite villain, the Compelling Confederation, to control it.
Ooh, I like that idea.
Hot take. They're literally poised to take it.
Let him have it.
Let them have it. Let everyone hate on them
Yeah.
for a little bit.
They've paid their dues over the years of
Yeah.
treachery, and I love them.
I just think that might be a fun direction for a lot more. Obviously it's BattleTech. It's a universe at war. War has to continue for this universe and the game that we love to continue. So I think that could be a fun point of contention.
Have you seen the anime G Gundam.
It's been a long time.
The theme of that was that whoever controlled Terra, basically they'd have like a tournament every 5 years, and every country would put one mech forward, one Gundam forward, and they would fight. Whoever won the tournament would control Terra for 5 or 3 years, a decade, I don't know, something like that, but a time period. Then the tournament happens again. Maybe we just need something like that. Look at that,
I
just
think that could be pretty cool.
simple.
Yeah. It's very, very clan-like in its approach as well.
Yeah. Wolf could go to that, then Sea Fox could get in, like you said, and they make sense. They're a neutral body.
Absolutely.
And then the Kaplans could be sneaky and buy out all the mercenaries and Sea Fox and then somehow take over Terra. There you go. There's the arc.
They could, absolutely.
There's the next 100 years, 50 years, 20 years, 10, I don't know, next period of time.
Yeah. The next era.
The next
It
era.
could be, I mean, we've barely scratched the surface of the L Clan era. So who knows what that's going to bring.
Totally. Cool. Well, wicked answer. I'm so stoked that you mentioned Clan Sea Fox. I was thinking that in the back of my head. So if people haven't found your podcast yet, want to see your content, where can they find you?
You can find the Mercenary Star podcast pretty much anywhere you find podcasts in audio version. So Spotify, Amazon, Apple, Google, they're all there. But like I said, because I do use such a visual element for the podcast itself, YouTube is definitely my primary platform. And I would love for people to come check it out, drop a subscribe so they know when I post new content, and throw some comments on the episodes. Let me know if I cover your favorite mercenary or if there's a fun fact that you feel that I missed. I'd love to hear about it.
Great. So if they go into YouTube and search Mercenary Star podcast, they'll find you?
Absolutely. I believe the address is, youtube.com/ and then they have handles now. So at Mercenary Star podcast, and it should show up. You can also find me on Twitter and Instagram as well, as far as socials go, and they'll direct you there too.
Heck yeah. Rock on. Well, Seth, thank you for taking the time to be here. This has been super awesome and an interesting conversation. You're the man.
I appreciate it. Thank you for the invite, and glad to be a part of such an awesome interview. And again, love BungleTech and what you guys are doing.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. In December 2350, researchers on Terra developed the first viable Myanmar bundle. Dubbed the Schwarzenegger bicep, this impressive merging of Myanmar fibers and neuroelectric circuitry was capable of contracting by over 90% of its length, and immediately crushed its test harness, tore free of the wall mountings, and launched the test weights through the ceiling. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. I am now joined by the stupendous Kanan Hill from the legendary podcast of Mechs and Men. Kanan, thank you for being here today.
I am Kanan Hill. It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Oh, dude, truly the pleasure is all mine.
We love BungleTech. We're always talking about BungleTech. We do.
That is too much of a privilege. I've been referring people to your podcast as well, actually. I have some friends that recently started getting into the literature, and I'm like, oh my God, you got to listen to this. This is a fun way to walk along the journey with you.
Nice.
For people that somehow know about BungleTech but don't know about Mechs and Men, how long has your podcast been around, buddy?
We first started releasing episodes last fall, like in October or November, I think. And really, I had the idea last August. So it's been about a year, I guess, since I really started working on it. So that's cool.
That's actually a milestone, man. A year.
It's gone fast, too. We've had a good time.
And you produce a lot of content. I think you produce almost an episode every 2 weeks, it feels like, or an episode every week. Seems to be quite a lot.
We try to hit weekly, but it is tough. So we do, sometimes we gotta skip a week. But we try our best.
Of Mechs and Men, a BattleTech podcast by any other name would smell as strange. But what's the story behind your name, good sir?
It took us a while, right? When you decide to start a podcast, naturally, just like, say, starting a band, you have to pick a name, right? And this, of course, can be quite harrowing, especially when yourself and your two partners are all, quite stubborn and picky.
Who's the most stubborn?
It's Brent. It's definitely Brent. I'm sorry.
There you go, Brent.
It's true. He knows it. It did take us a while. We went back and forth for a week or two, at least, just writing stuff. I had a whole big list of names. I think we came back on it. I mean, the idea is we wanted something literary, right? We, naturally we're thinking of like cool book titles, literature. We had a bunch of different ideas, but I think both me and Aaron independently had written down of Mechs and Men, like of Mice and Men, right? It's like the Steinbeck. And we were like comparing our list, and we were like, oh, we both like this one. And then Brent liked it. And really, we were just like, oh, this one's good. We like it. Of Mechs and Men. It sounds good. It wasn't like some flash of lightning inspired. Like we actually we talked it out, but we decided, we thought it was cool. We went with it. I think it was a good decision. I like the name. I do.
Well, I think it's a very clear name for one. Like when I first heard your name, I'm like, oh, this is about BattleTech fiction. It was very clear to me. Of Mice and Men, when I was in junior high, it was mandatory reading for school, and I think it probably still is. Obviously, a classic.
It's classic.
Totally a classic. And yeah, it's a great fit. It's a great name. I love it. So it's cool that the two of you sort of stumbled upon it at the same time.
Yeah, we that's what I mean. I still have it. It's like just a whole big old notes document full of like names. Most of them were terrible. A couple of them were cool. Maybe I did save some of them. Maybe I'll use them for like future projects or like videos we do or something. That would be cool.
I want to know one of your terrible names. Do you have one of those ready? Can you pull it out, a terrible name that you had?
I'm going to put them on blast. The other two guys, they tried to push me for a fistful of sea bills. Which is cool. It's okay. It's like a Western. Mm-hmm. I get it. But I was like, no, guys, we can't do that. But they were like, no, it's awesome. And I was like, I don't know. What is this? I think, I was like, we can still use that, though. They were way into for a fistful of sea bills and like stuff like that. They love it.
I think that name to me, it would, like when I hear it, I would think Merc stories only or Merc units only, like something about mercenary specific. Where Mice and Men seems to be much more, literature focused, right?
That's the idea. We had this exact conversation, and we were like, yeah, man, of Mechs and Men, let's do it. Let's talk about these books. Also, speaking of names, I think BungleTech is great. Brent was like, oh, there's a new BattleTech podcast. What's it called? BungleTech. I'm like, oh, that's pretty cool. I like that. I think that's pretty good.
Thanks, man. Yeah, that was, it just truly explains our experience playing this game, so it's easy to come up with. So, your podcast is pretty unique in the community. What does your podcast aim to bring to it?
More than anything, we just really love these books. We just love BattleTech. And we would, it was born from, us reading the books and just talking about them and getting really excited and just wanting to, we just want to talk about all of this fiction. It's incredible. There's so much. And I was like, somebody's got to talk about this, right? Something happened here. It's wild. There's so many books. And especially, we were hoping that maybe players or people who are interested in BattleTech who hadn't read a lot of the novels or knew a lot about like the characters and the narrative and the story, we were hoping that we could, maybe help like some players maybe be like more aware that there's all this stuff out there. There's all this cool story. It's really fun to play the game on the tabletop, but what's really fun? Context. Yeah, if you know why the little guys are down there, it's I think it's even more interesting. It's so fun. It's incredible how many different writers have written for BattleTech. It's so varied. We wanted to shout these guys out. It's like, man, these guys wrote these books, and you can tell they really poured their heart into it. Like, some of these books are, like, incredible. I wanted people to notice. I noticed. We noticed that they're beautiful, and we wanted to talk about them. Hopefully convince some people that, man, these books are pretty cool. Check them out.
So essentially the aim of your podcast was to bring the love of the BattleTech literature to the community.
Absolutely.
That touches upon it, but is there anything that makes your podcast particularly special or unique? I think this is a pretty obvious answer, but I'm asking you anyhow.
Aside from our show being specifically fiction focused, like that narrative style we do, we also try to be funny. I try to be funny, right? I wanted to make sure that it was entertaining. That was our thing. I was like, guys, we got to be punchy, because I think that that's going to get people in, right? It's like, if you notice, the show is just us, like, just being like, isn't this cool, right? Aren't these books so cool? I love this part. It's so cool, isn't it? Check it out. Buy the books. Also, we've known each other for a long time. We're 3 good friends, and I think that goes a long way. I think we have a good chemistry, and I think that goes a long way. I think, these guys are easy to talk to. I've known them for a long time, and we know each other really well. We know how to play off each other really well. I think it really works. We're having a good time.
If I can speak about my experience of what I think makes your podcast special is, first, it really feels like when you're listening, you're in the room with you 3 guys. It feels like you're sitting at a table, just chatting and trading stories, which is really nice. And what's sort of cool about it is I don't want to reread the books that I've read. I've read a ton of BattleTech books. So, for example, The Grey Death Legion.
Yeah.
I don't want to go back and reread that book, but reliving it through hearing you guys talk about it,
yes,
it's like I'm reminiscing. And it's such a nice, positive feeling. And hearing your guys' perspective, like now my perspective of Grayson Carlisle is forever changed listening to you guys. Because now I'm re-experiencing it from your lens. It's a really enjoyable listen. It's like a walk through memory lane, right? It's like you're giving me a guided tour through the stories.
You're right. A big part of it is, hey, you read these, 10 years ago. Come back through with us. You'll have a good time. That's true. Good point. That is absolutely something that we were hoping to accomplish. So it's great to hear you say that. Thank you.
Oh, no. Thank you for the content. So, our podcast is about messing up. So we had to ask the question, what is your favorite BattleTech bungle? Favorite, most notable, most memorable? Either of those.
I was thinking about bungles. I've been playing Alpha Strike with my brother. I've been showing him the game. We're having a good time. I love the Raven, right? I have this Raven. I'm always trying to do the narcs and stuff. I think that stuff's so fun. And
hell yeah.
I didn't realize till the other day I was reading that, and this is for anyone listening, I didn't know. I bungled it, right? I realized I had played a whole bunch of games. The outcomes would have been different had I realized that narcs take effect on the same round that you shoot them in Alpha Strike. If you hit them with the narc, that applies immediately. You don't have to wait for the next round. Everyone needs to know this.
Oh, wow.
This is important. I didn't know this.
That's a big buff.
Yeah, so I made a whole bunch of bungles. I was always waiting for the next round. I was like, oh man, if I'd known this, I would have done better.
Exact opposite of the bungles I make. Your bungle made it harder for you. Our bungles make it easy for me.
Yeah, a little public service announcement. I wanted to shout it out.
That's awesome.
Shout out to the narcs. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, man. Shout out to the narcs out there. Underappreciated weapon, I think.
Absolutely.
Very cool. Very, very cool. All right.
Who knows? Maybe it'll come back around. Maybe the day of the narc is upon us.
Oh, yeah, man. What would we need? We need like a ER narc. Actually, having a narc at longer range would be crazy. Because it's 369, I think. Oh, you playing Alpha, but I think in Classic it's 369, I think. And, actually, don't listen to me, world. You know how bad I am with rules. It's either 369 or 51015. I think it's one of those range bands. Or is it 4812? Oh my god, it could be any of them. I don't know anymore. Okay, I'm just gonna shut up. Okay, I really want to know because you are a man in the lore. You're embedded in the lore, buddy. You're swimming around, arm around Lori, high-fiving Grayson. If your arm's not around Lori.
Nice.
Someone that's named Lori, but it's not Grayson's Lori, because that would be a bad situation. You're buddies with everyone in there. You're ingrained. So I want to know, if you could place yourself in the BattleTech universe, who would you be, what would you do, and where would you be?
Oh, if I had to live in the BattleTech universe, probably be like a professional musician or like perhaps a holovid star actress. Now, if I had to do a military thing, the funny thing about the BattleTech world is that you can be anything. You can just be a guy.
Totally.
It would be cool to be, like rich. That'd be cool. But, all right, specifically, you were like, listen, who do you know? What do you want to be? I know what you're getting at.
Whatever you want. Don't limit yourself to a character. Don't be like, I'm going to be Jamie Wolf. No, be Kanan Wolf.
Kanan Wolf. You know what? I got to say, mechs are really cool, but especially when I read the books, whenever they do the parts about like aerospace fighters, I still always think, man, flying jets is like really cool. And I'm serious. I think it would be cool to be an aerospace fighter. I think that every time I read about the aerospace fighters, I'm like, man, these guys are cool.
All right. So you're an aerospace fighter.
Or like a lord, like a baron or of like a duchy. That'd be cool. I'd have all these subjects, my holdings and whatnot. I'd be maneuvering against other families. It would be cool to do the whole feudal thing as well. Kind of like be like a baron or have like a house unit, militia. That'd be cool. I could do that.
Okay. I'm going to make you choose. You can only be one man, and what you say you're going to be reincarnated in the BattleTech universe one day, and what you say now is going to come to fruition. Lord or aerospace, I mean, you could combine them. Whatever you want. The sky is limitless, good sir.
It's true, rich people love to fly planes. So, actually, I'll choose Raven Pilot. I'll go with my heart. I'll stick with my fundamentals. And I always thought the Raven was cool. Since like Mech Commander, I played Mech Commander when I was a kid, and I was like, oh, the Raven's cool. And I always thought it would be cool to pilot a Raven. So I will. I'll say that. I'd be a Raven pilot. I'd be way into the electronic countermeasures. I'd be doing my narcs and my tag lasers and all the ECM and whatnot. That'd be really cool.
Hell yeah. And where would you be doing it?
Oh man, tough question. It definitely depends on the era.
Remember, you're getting reincarnated as this, so you should be very specific.
Man, I'd want to be a mercenary, right? Mercenaries are cool, dude. We'd have like our outfit, and I'd be like the electronic countermeasures guy. I'd be the Raven pilot, and we'd like go around doing jobs and stuff. What region or, what kind of area? We'd probably operate in Lyran space, taking jobs, hitting up Galatea and whatnot. It's, it depends on the era. Current era, that'd be cool. All of that going on over there, the hinterlands and whatnot. It'd be cool, man. I would be a Raven pilot for a Merc Lance. Absolutely.
Very cool. And so now that you've let that stew, why, good sir? Why? You said because, you're just following your heart? What's your heart saying?
Ever since I played Mech Commander, man, you watch that intro where the Raven, he's running Panther, right? The Raven pilot. He's running from the Mad Cat. He doesn't have jump jets. Oh, but then you get a Raven, like, shortly into that game, right? You find Mystique in the woods. She's powered down. But then when you get her, you realize she's got, like, the ECM and stuff. I don't know. I'm like, oh, man, these are cool. They look cool. Yeah, it's just ever since I was a kid, I was like, I like this one. I would drive this one. And so that's why I was like, I just got to go with, like, 9-year-old Kanan, right? That's what he would want me to say. I did it.
You did it. You finally did it. You finally did it, 9-year-old Kanan. You can look back at yourself and be like, buddy, I made it happen.
Great manual. That game, the manual, it was awesome, dude. It was like so thick.
Mech Commander is the only game that I actually ended up missing in the, I missed Mech Warrior 1 and I missed Mech Commander 1 and 2. It's a regret of mine. I didn't have a PC at the time, I think, or maybe it just was out of my radar, who knows, because I'm all about that turn-based stuff.
I played it online. It was one of the first like online games I played. Like I went on I was like, oh, I played it like on the internet against like other people. Yeah, and I was like 10 or 11 years old at the time. It was cool.
Yeah, it was a big deal when we first connected online. That modem dialing up.
MPlayer. I remember we had to do mplayer.com, which was like the precursor to GameSpy. I remember when GameSpy came out and they like kicked us off. They were like, you got to go over there now. I was like, oh, what weird. What's this? Is GameSpy even still around?
I have no idea.
But yeah, hit me up on MPlayer if anyone remembers. Shoutouts to mplayer.com.
Hit Kanan up on MPlayer, everybody.
Heck yeah.
You should host your own MPlayer site. Get some Mech Commander action going on. Set it for Ravens only. The dream.
Ravens only.
Well, I think it sort of makes sense that you would be a Raven pilot. Once again, you like aerospace as well, and a Raven's very spaceshipy looking, like in its design. So
that's true.
It has that vibe. And I totally pick up the love of the aerospace when you guys are talking about on your podcast, when you're explaining those like combat scenes and the time and the distance and everything like that. The complexity of it. I remember when I was listening to you guys talking about I forget her name, the chick that comes back as the crazy assassin with her lover when they're dying. You're going over that scene in the podcast.
Sue Ellen?
Sue Allen, there you go, yeah. When you're talking about that scene, and the complexities of it, the distance, the run, the calculations,
Yeah.
everything like that. Yeah, aerospace is super, super cool. Yeah, they don't get a lot of credit because they get blown out of the air pretty easily. They don't have a lot of armor on them generally. But I mean, oh my god. Yeah, aerospace fighters are badass.
Sometimes you wipe out an entire company of Panthers in like one pass. So that's cool.
The dream.
The dream. Yeah, absolutely. Also, I like playing the Raven in the online game, like MechWarrior Online, with the stealth armor and stuff. I like sneaking around and shooting people with the narcs. I totally do that, by the way. I like sneaking around with the stealth armor.
Yeah, sticking a narc feels good. I mean, I've only done it in the tabletop. Well, no, that's not true. I've done MechWarrior 5 and stuff like that as well, but man, the tabletop when you land a narc.
Yeah.
Oh man, the missile's coming down,
Heck
baby.
yeah.
Coming down.
Tag lasers.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
go.
The Orion
Indirect
with his
fire.
narc, man. The good old reliable Orion, just, I never am disappointed by that mech, despite it not being very good. It passes the bar on everything, in my opinion.
It's a classic. Aaron loves the Orion. That's one of his favorites.
Oh, I love it. I love its look. I love everything about it. Anyhow, this has been friggin' very cool and a privilege to talk to you. So if people haven't heard about you and they've been blown away by this conversation, like, oh my god, I want to relive the fiction with Kanan Hill and his pals, where can they go to find you? How can they get engaged with you?
We are of Mechs and Men, a BattleTech book club. And we're available on all major platforms. Yeah, look it up. If you search BattleTech, we should be in the results, right? It shouldn't be too hard to find us. But yeah, you'll see us, of Mechs and Men, right? We have the black with the green, like wireframe, kind of art with the little guy in the neuro helmet. Check it out. If you're interested, if you want to hear some guys just chop it up about these books, absolutely, come on by. I think you'll have a good time.
Well, I certainly did, good sir. And I certainly do, because I'm still listening, because I'm catching up. So thank you for the efforts you're putting in. And it's just a fun walk down memory lane with a quirky perspective, which I like. A fun perspective.
Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for it. And thank you so much for taking the time to be here and trusting me to be on my podcast for this guest appearance. It's amazing. It's amazing, dude.
The pleasure is all mine.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. While Diudon II was selected for colonization on account of its vast mineral deposits, including titanium, manganese, and near-surface laterite veins, immigration was mostly sustained by interest in the various endemic life forms, which were widely described as tasty. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Welcome back, everybody. Thank you for still being here. I'm pretty stoked because the next guest is a person that you probably all know, the legendary Mike the Viking from the Valhalla Club podcast. Welcome, my friend.
Thanks for having me, brother. Let's go.
Cheers to you. Thanks for being here, man. This is awesome. And once again, thanks for giving us an apartment in your Discord. That's been a nice welcoming home.
You guys have a great show, man. And like we've talked about on the server in the past, like there's a lot of Discords and it's becoming oversaturated. So let's give each content creator group that doesn't already have a server their own dedicated booth so we can have one consolidated place to hang out. That's awesome,
Heck yeah. No, it's radical. I appreciate it. So I'm here to talk about your podcast. I want to know more about your podcast. For people that don't know about the Valhalla Club, how long has your podcast been active?
Oh, so as of, I'm going to date it. Can I date it? I'm going to date the podcast.
You can date it. Date it, man. Okay, I don't understand what this dating thing is.
It's August 1st. The date is there. As of right now, it's August 1st. And that makes it our 12th month. So this is our 1 year anniversary because our first episode was published the first week of September because we've published the first week of every month, minus this month. We're going to be late because of Gen Con. But episode 12 is August. So it's our 1 year like anniversary. So been doing it for a year.
Sick. That's awesome. So I'm really curious, and you've sort of mentioned it casually to me, but I want the world to know, and I want to understand it better, good sir. What's the story behind your name? Because to me, the Valhalla Club, of all the BattleTech podcasts out there, that's the one that's the biggest leap from something like BattleTech or Mech related, right? So hit me with it.
Yeah. All right. So have you listened to, or I know there's a lot of BattleTech podcasts, so even I'm behind. So no harm, no foul. If you're not up to date with of Mechs and Men, they are currently going through the Warrior trilogy, and they're on book 1 of the Warrior trilogy. And on Solaris 7, in the Steiner part of town, I don't have any of my information open, so I'm purely drawing off memory right now. And you know what? It might not be the Steiner part of town. Either way.
It'll give the fans something to look up after.
On Solaris 7, there is a bar called Thor's Shield Hall. And within Thor's Shield Hall is a VIP bar called the Valhalla Club. And that's where like the absolute top warriors within the Solaris circuit, the Solaris arena, get access to because they're the elite warriors, as well as, nobles and all those other wonderful people. So that is where the name comes from. Before we decided on a name, we're like, okay, well, what should we call it? Right. And it's like, I think Dave's original idea was just send it. And I was like, well, no, like it needs to have some type of like BattleTech tie to it, because otherwise it just doesn't make sense. And then we've had a lot of people comment or ask us, be like, or I've seen comments in other posts, whether it's Reddit or Discord on the various servers, this, that, and the other, being like, okay, well, like, how is the Valhalla Club related to BattleTech? And then I think I don't even remember what episode it was, but we explained it. It was one of the earlier episodes, and as Bourbon said, well, read a book. And one of the core trilogies that most people start with, if you've read the Warrior trilogies, specifically even book 1, you'll know where the name comes from. But that's where we got the name. I wasn't a fan of just send it. I submitted the proposal of the Valhalla Club, and I won. So take that, Dave.
Nice. So you're embedded in the lore. That's sick.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know that your podcast, at least the description of it, you tend to be about your region, a lot about your region. I want to ask specifically what your podcast aims to bring to the community, not only your region's community, but also the greater community worldwide.
Yeah, so we're a Colorado BattleTech community. So the server started as just a Colorado Springs Discord server back in 2021, something like that. A couple months after we created the Colorado Springs server, we opened it up to the entire state, and it started flooding in because there were already established Facebook groups. So then it became the Colorado BattleTech Discord. And we have, let's see, the guy that joined today was member number 356. So within the server for Discord, just within Colorado, there's at least 350 members, because some of those are bots and they count this, that, and the other. But it has grown a lot in the past 2 years or so, because 2020, 2021. So three and a half years. I don't know. Time is a construct. I don't know what I'm talking about.
That's why it doesn't matter when you date the podcast. Time is a construct, baby.
It doesn't matter. Absolutely. So as it grew, we started having more people coming up with putting on events. And then we reached a point to where we've almost had, I think last year and maybe even this year, we reached that point to where we've had at least one actual event per month throughout, let's call it the I-25 corridor between, Fort Collins, Denver, Colorado Springs, and Pueblo. It's central Colorado, That's where the majority of the population is. But they've ranged all in that area from Fort Collins down to Pueblo. And yeah, we've had on average about one event per month for almost the past 2 years. And so that gives us a lot of opportunity for battle reports. That's ultimately what like spawned the podcast. We've got such a large community and an awesome community here in Colorado. If we have a podcast where we can, because not everyone is always paying attention to the Discord, and it'll get cluttered, this, that, and the other. If we put out at least like a once a month episode where we can give updates on what's happening in the community, upcoming events, our after action reports from events that we have completed in the past, and just various things like that. And then aside from what's happening in the community, we try to pick various topics, whether classic or alpha strike. The initial plan was to do like the initial like ratio was like for every 3 episodes of alpha strike we were going to do 1 episode of classic. And I think we've done 1 episode of classic dedicated like discussion over the last 11 published episodes, like premiere monthly episodes. So that's not exactly working to plan. I'm trying to loop everybody back in like, hey, we can't forget about the classic side. But yeah, so just general updates on BattleTech throughout the Colorado community, upcoming past reports, who won, interview those individuals, what was going through their mind in those specific situations as they're in that tournament. We've had an interview with Rick, who's an awesome painter, and we talk, painting techniques, tips, this, that, and the other. Yeah, just various topics, whether it's classic, alpha strike, or even lore, for, as we call, the main metal, so like the main point of discussion for that day.
So what I'm hearing is that really, rather than trying to say what you bring to your community, specifically your podcast is really focused on bolstering and growing the community.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of reporting on, like I was saying, upcoming stuff and stuff that has happened. There was the first 2 episodes, maybe 3, where we had the news from around the sphere, where Dave would take various battle reports that was posted in the Colorado BattleTech server and report on it like a news anchor. And that was a lot of fun. A lot of traffic in the battle report channel on that server has slowed down a little bit, and so we weren't getting enough to really upkeep that segment per se. A lot of people are playing games, they're just not writing battle reports. So write battle reports and we can have a news segment again. But yeah,
Very cool.
Yeah, just community updates, growing the community, and then random discussions about classic alpha strike lore for overall non-Colorado community, or those that are new to the game, because there's a lot of new players both within Colorado and worldwide because of the massive success that was the Clan Invasion Kickstarter. So
Heck yeah, it's awesome.
Trying to bring people up to speed, pull them in, make them feel welcome, and want to make sure everyone has a good time.
Nice. Well, you definitely have a cool vibe. I think when I was like naming the vibe of each of the different podcasts, I think I said the Valhalla Club's like has a frat boy vibe, but sort of like a positive, like a modern frat, not like an Animal House frat, but like a giving to the community and everything like that.
It's not Blue Mountain State. I don't know if you've seen that show.
So all that being said, is there anything in particular that jumps out to you that you feel makes your podcast special or unique?
I've heard us described as a somewhat like mix. We've got that Wolfnet vibe, but also because of like our main metal segments, we've got a little bit of like that MechBay vibe. So we're like somewhere in the middle, but also our drinks of the month are fun. They all taste terrible. And I've told Ben, once we get through this initial list, we need to start over, but actually make them good.
Nice.
And just rewrite them, because the majority of them are terrible. But as for
well, it's also terrible getting shot by a PPC in real life. So
that is fair. The Pelican Club one, or whatever it was, the Pelican shooter that he had the other day for our, was it episode 11, 10, one or the other, when we're talking about Solaris. So the title of the episode was Mech Warrior's Guide to Solaris 7. And literally in that shot is a like a sardine or something like that. I'm like, that's disgusting. No one's going to drink that. That's terrible. Who wrote this? Shame on them. As for something unique, I think the only thing that we really offer that is unique per se is just a really dedicated local update specific to the Colorado community, of course, and then the drinks of the month. The other discussions we have, you can probably find very, very similar discussions on a few of the other podcasts, but as for something that's specifically unique to us, it's booze, you know?
It's booze. Let's
Because
get
we
drunk.
named ourselves after our bar. So
Very cool. I gotta ask, because you know our podcast is about making mistakes. So, do you have a favorite, a most memorable, a most significant BattleTech bungle that comes to mind?
I've been pondering that all day since you gave me the pre-read questions, and that was hard, especially because I play like 90%, if not more, Alpha Strike, which is a much less convoluted and confusing rule set. It's in one book, not 5. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think Alpha Strike bungles are a lot. They stand out, not nearly as large as the classic bungles do. And then like you mentioned, like it could be like a lore bungle, and that's not necessarily like a tabletop bungle. It could be just any bungle BattleTech related. That was hard for me to come up with as a primary Alpha Strike player. And that's not to say I haven't made any mistakes on the Alpha Strike table by any means, but they don't usually stand out to the sheer extent that classic bungles do. I think for me, the favorite bungle that I have exploited per se, and it's not necessarily like an actual BattleTech rule. So it's a Wolfnet rule. So for those that don't know, Wolfnet is a tournament-based system, and it's an objective-based game. You score points based on how many objectives you complete and score, and that is how everything's tallied, right? Formerly called Rampage, now just called Bunkers, because everyone just called it Bunkers because it was the only mission with bunkers. A lot of people get focused, and it's an Alpha Strikeism. Even if you've got, no matter what type of scenario it is, a lot of people just turn any Alpha Strike game into a stand-up fight. They just completely forget, I'm going for objectives here. Like I have a mission to complete. And especially when you're in a very fast-paced game like a Wolfnet 350 game, because you've got 80 minutes to finish, and that's pretty quick. You need to know what you're doing, but a lot of people get that tunnel vision on, I'm just gonna kill the enemy. But you score points based on objectives, and your objectives for bunkers, as it's called now officially, is to destroy the bunkers. So twice now over the past year in Wolfnet events, I have won on a technicality in bunkers, because for each 15 points of damage done to a bunker, you get 1 objective point. And if no objective points have been scored, then it's whoever did the most damage to the bunkers. And so that, hey, this is your final round, bell happens, or you've got 2 minutes or whatever gets announced, and neither side has done any damage to the bunkers. And I'm like, I need to shoot a bunker. And I'll shoot the bunker, but I won't do 15 points of damage, because I don't know if you've seen Alpha Strike stat cards, even clan ones, they max out around 5, 4 to 5, I think is like the average for a clan unit. And that's typically what I've taken over the past year and a half, 2 years to 350 events. But yeah, it would take a few units to do 15 points of damage, and each bunker has 20 health. So to do that amount of damage, I would need to have a few units left on the table, but by the end of 80 minutes, I've probably got 2 units left on the table. So 1 by technicality, because I did more damage to the bunker than my opponent, which feels like a dirty win, but it's an objective-based rule. Everyone forgets it, which therefore makes it's bungle in its own way, because you kind of forgot what you were supposed to do. Because you just started seeing red and just started murdering units instead of buildings. In that game, you're supposed to murder buildings. Nobody wants to murder buildings. They want to shoot the stompy robots, which I respect. At least twice now, I have won bunkers on that technicality of just having done more damage to the bunker. And therefore, because I won. It's my favorite bungle.
Very nice. Very cool. Okay, so now I gotta ask, so obviously you've played a lot of BattleTech. You're also ingrained in the lore. So, what is the best mech? That's right, the best mech. There's no pussyfooting about this here, buddy. You're gonna tell me the best mech and you're gonna justify it. And everyone that listens to this podcast, 1% will probably agree, and 99% will judge you. But you're gonna name the best, and there's no escape. Give it to me.
That's fair. Growing up, obviously, I always loved the Timberwolf. It's a freaking beast, and there's no denying that. While playing Mech Warrior 4 Mercenaries as a kid, I loved Bushwhacker. But since I've gotten into the tabletop, and even in Alpha Strike, both sides, whether it's Alpha Strike or a Classic, I never make a list without an Ice Ferret. I'm always taking an Ice Ferret. It has been an absolute workhorse for me. They are really fast, really strong. I love mediums and heavies because that's what does the most work. Those are the guys carrying the team. Assaults, yeah, they've got the armor, they've got the weapons, but man, they're crawling. Lights, they definitely, especially depending on what rule set you're using, lights are kind of weak in Alpha Strike because they're lights. It's just paper thin. So 2 pips, 1 each armor structure, or 2 armor, 1 structure, depending on the engine configuration. They're extremely easy to kill. Now, lights get better in Alpha Strike if you're using formation bonuses and start throwing in special pilot abilities with recon bonuses and actually let them do what they're supposed to do. But no matter what system you're playing or how many optional rules you're playing, it's the mediums and the heavies that do the work. And I love the Ice Ferret. I know everyone calls it the running refrigerator or whatever because of how it looks. I don't care how it looks, man. It does work. All the configurations, whether it's Prime, Alpha Bravo, or a favorite of mine and Charles, an Ice Ferret J, which is the J is faster because of a supercharger, and it's throwing like 7.6 short medium. Like, it's stupid strong. And it's like a TMM4. It's extremely expensive in points. Do not get me wrong. It is super expensive because of how strong and how hard to hit it is. But I'm going to say on record, the best unit is the Ice Ferret because it gets stuff done.
And so, following from that, the world can deduce that you're also directly implying that the clans are superior to the Innisphere,
I
correct?
do play clans 90% of the time.
There we go, everybody. You heard it here first.
Yep. When I first got into it and I actually got my minis and whatnot, and this, like, once I got my clan invasion stuff, obviously the majority of everything I got was clan because it was the new thing in the minis. My initial paint scheme for all my clan units, I went straight custom clan unit with like an Aurora Borealis camo scheme. For those that don't know, I love Alaska. I miss being able to watch the northern lights from my bedroom window. And I was like, how cool would it be to have like this Viking themed clan unit, which were pretty much a warrior caste system almost in and of themselves, with like an Aurora scheme. And so that's where that started. And then I play a lot of clans now. That camo scheme was very time consuming. And so once I finished that cluster and I started the next one, I was like, I'm going to go simple and just do a 2-tone paint scheme because these Aurora camo lines was really, really time consuming. But yeah, so it's custom clan unit, Clan Ragnarok for the win. They're like Ghost Bear splinters. I haven't actually like written out the head canon for like their existence per se, but it kind of makes sense ish, right?
Well, Ice Ferret for the win. That's good to know. So if you have any hate mail or disagreement, don't bother sending it to BungleTech. The Valhalla Club's where you go.
You can send it to the Valhalla Club at outlook.com, and I will just send you the stat card for an Ice Ferret J and be like, are you sure about that? Are you sure about that?
So on that topic, if people haven't heard of your podcast and they want to find you, they want to listen to you, where can they go?
As far as I know, because I'm the one that publishes everything, we're on every possible streaming service. Just look up the Valhalla Club. The logo looks like a Viking shield with a couple battle axes over top. We're on, for the longest time, I thought we were on everything but Pandora, but I think we're also on Pandora now. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, it's on all of it. When I look at the metrics, we're even being listened to on platforms that I didn't even know existed. So clearly stuff's being pushed out to multiple places. So we're everywhere.
Awesome. All right. Well, dude, I appreciate you taking the time being here and saying to the world that the Ice Ferret is the best mech, a medium clan mech. Man, what a bold, bold statement. You're the man for making it. Thank you for taking the time. Thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me. It's been a blast, and let's continue to grow this awesome community. I cannot wait for all the stuff to show up in my Mercenary Kickstarter that I spent way too much money on. But I am so excited because it's going to further pulse out through all the game stores and just continue to grow. BattleTech is in a very prime spot, and I am super excited.
Heck yeah, man.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. Fire control systems on BattleMechs are actually the coordination of a number of advanced computers. Targeting tracking systems integrate feeds from an array of sensors: thermal, electromagnetic, radar, motion detection, gravimetric shadowing, which form a comprehensive battlescape that flows into the battle computer, which in turn parses it and presents it to the piloting for aiming, while also coordinating with the DI computer to keep weapons ready during maneuvering. Once the pilot pulls the trigger, the sophisticated computers are able to bring selected weapons on target and fire. Unfortunately, these systems are still unable to compensate for non-standard gravity or atmosphere, resulting in a loss of accuracy. It is rumored that Federated Suns researchers are close to cracking this elusive capability. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I am stoked to be joined by Matthew Bloodbath Barons from the Wolfnet podcast, the legendary Wolfnet podcast.
Glad to be here, Nathan. Appreciate you for the invite.
Oh, man. No, it's an honor. I'm in the same Discord video chat with you recording this right now.
We're all small people.
Small people, perhaps, but people that have been doing it for how long? How long has your podcast been active? I know this answer, but the world may not.
Oh, I just looked at the numbers. It's been over 5 years, 63 months, I think.
5 years.
So we got established back in 30 April 2018. I think our first Baby Steps podcast was, where we had horrible audio, but we've improved immensely over the years.
That is an intense commitment and love for BattleTech to be on this journey for 5 years.
We've had a lot of help along the way. It's not just one person. It's not just five. It's a whole community. Fellow podcasters: Andrew Kroll, Aaron Kroll, Charles Gideon Dirks, and Thomas Kruger, Silent Sea Raven. It's been a journey.
So, your story isn't written yet, good sir. But do you have a climax over the previous 5 years?
For the podcast?
Yeah, I'm just curious. It just popped to my mind.
I would say that we ask ourselves that about every year. It's like, do we want to continue? And wholeheartedly, everybody usually wants to commit to continuation of it. There's really no reason to stop. Life happens, but we do usually adapt and we stay flexible. Sometimes we have some hiatuses where we'll be at training or something or on the job, and that can take some effect. And we usually try and roll with the punches. I would say that we would continue it as long as we're accepted and as long as we can provide content, because that's pretty much what we're labeled as content creators.
And am I correct that a few of you are military men?
We've got at least two combat veterans.
I don't know if you can answer this, and I'm just throwing random questions at you now.
Shoot.
So I'm a Canadian, and Canadian military culture isn't as strong as American military culture. But I've noticed there's a lot of people that are vets or are currently enrolled in the military that are really passionate about BattleTech. And I'm wondering what the draw is from that community. Because I know BattleTech itself, they've done fundraisers like Support Our Troop fundraisers and stuff like that. What's that connection, if you know it?
First off, I would say that every country has a good military establishment, and there are plenty of common folks like us that sign a dotted line and say we will defend foreign and domestic, and continue our family's way of life. No matter if it's rain or shine. And we shout out to those that are on the front lines every day, including family and friends. And we always think about the past loved ones that we have lost, and we hold them dear. We recognize them and we respect. And I think the connection that draws some veterans to BattleTech play is the strategy, military aspect. The fiction can be pretty abstract sometimes, but they're connecting through fiction and some gameplay with specific units or types of units bears true to this is fun, to the aspect of training purposes or staying sharp or continuing something you were trained to be good at. Looking at a lot of the training aspects of terrain recognition and use for avenues of approach, defense, attack, numbers of units. You should never attack more with less than 3 times the amount on a defended position or any type of facility. It plays a huge key role. There are fabulous strategists that are not military, and it doesn't matter if you are or not. Everybody can learn. Nobody just is made this way. You become that, or you learn, and it doesn't have to require that. My children play occasionally, and we play for the aspect of not being too violent, but more like, oh, I beat you, so you go to jail, or we're playing for candy or something to buy the time, or getting into crafts with miniatures and paint, using tools and glue and developing some of those fine motor skills, working on mathematics with the classic or Alpha Strike side. There's so many different aspects of the game that you can learn and facilitate with.
Mm-hmm. Very cool. On the topic of becoming something, how did the Wolfnet name become into existence? What's the story behind it?
I believe and remember that when we started to look at a podcast, we spent some time looking at possible handles or brand names or just something generic. But I think the Krulls, Aaron and Andrew, cousins, basically were Wolf's Dragoons fanatics, and their idea of if we have an information or reporting aspect of a podcast, perhaps it would be from an intelligence standpoint. And, looking at the past fiction that's canonized, Wolfnet was the intelligence portion of Wolf's Dragoons. So I think that's where it kind of stuck. And we tried not to be completely attached to the IP because nobody wants to violate, IP or copyright things. So it's kind of like, how can we change this 20% or more and develop something that isn't going to ruffle feathers, but still will be kind of a connection and something people recognize.
Mm-hmm. So your podcast has been around, obviously mentioned, for 5 years. It's a long time. I'm curious what your podcast aims to bring to the community, and also if that's evolved over time.
It absolutely has. It has been extremely innovative. I think that over the years, we don't just talk the talk, we walk the walk. They basically call us content creators for a podcast. And we've done 62 to 67 episodes, give or take, with smaller ones to fill in some gaps. And we try to do it once a month for our free time purposes, because it seems like a lot of podcasts that do it weekly kind of get burned out because they're burning the candle at both ends. So we try and do it where it's more casual, and yet we get plenty of content in, but without overworking and making it too difficult, besides just having a regular life too.
Mm-hmm.
Mainly, we've settled into interviews, updates, news, events, and reporting, mostly. And we have also, touch base into really heavily an objective-based tabletop tournament format as facilitators. We've been labeled as playtesters and innovators for creating templates, helping with rules. If they don't make sense to the community, we ask those rule makers, what does this mean, and how is it developed, and how does it actually take place in the system, so we don't get it too inaccurate. And we help people understand how that works, because we're playing the game too, and we don't really want to run it wrong. We want to make sure that we're helping the game instead of hindering it. And I think a lot of people have to recognize that when they play the game, that if they get involved with facilitating or helping out or teaching or providing content, that they keep it pretty accurate, because otherwise you stray away, and that usually doesn't sit well with anybody.
Very cool. You sort of touched upon it there, but is there something in particular that you think makes your podcast special or unique in the BattleTech podcast community?
Absolutely. I think it's more entertaining and invigorating for most, but not all. I mean, it's kind of like we've talked about in the beginning of how many podcasts are out there. When we started, there was basically one. And how do we make one that helps the game system or helps the fiction? And we'd like to help pioneer with different ways of looking at it, not just the same way, because everyone has a different taste, everyone has a different flavor, and if we can provide that niche that people like to get into, then we're going to continue doing that. And with the other content providers, we acknowledge them and respect them too, because they have another flavor that someone else likes, and if people choose that over others, we're okay with that.
And on the topic of flavors, our podcast flavor is making mistakes or bungles or being fools in general when it comes to the BattleTech table.
As always.
As always.
Because we're human. We're human, yeah.
We're human, and it's the experience, man. To play BattleTech is to make mistakes. Every once in a while, it's a complicated rule base. So I gotta ask, you've been doing this for a long time, you're experienced with the game. Is there a particular bungle that comes to mind for you that is a favorite of yours? And that can be a rule, it can literally be like fiction, it can be whatever you want.
Now that brought I had a question myself too, like, does the question mean from one aspect, or like you said, rule sets or the fiction or the IP or anything? And there's a lot of those that are favorites that I can think of. I can think of specifically where when we first get started, just like anybody else in the classic or Alpha Strike set, how you're accepting and developing the rule set and remembering it. Because I can remember sitting at my parents' table with my friends in high school, trying to start reading the rule set and playing the game, and thinking, so when we fire our machine guns and there's 200 rounds, do we use all the ammo, or just 2 points of ammo, or 1 point of ammo per
I wish
per turn? And
0 heat, 200 shots, the dream.
So how well do you acquire and take on the rule set and the knowledge of, this is the way that happens, that mechanic? And asking rule writers and developers, how is this supposed to work? And a lot of times there's pretty good explanations and examples in the rule sets, but other times there are not. There's gray areas, and that is one of those, that niche that we have tried to step into to help provide kind of a liaison, between the powers that be that write this stuff and the players that use it well or don't use it well. It's like, is this making the game more fun or less fun, or is it working right, or are we using it correctly? There are times when you hear in the middle of a tournament or in the middle of gameplay, like, I've been playing that rule all wrong this whole time. Like, yep, we've all been there. And all you do is recognize it and get back on your horse and move forward.
What did you land on with how many machine gun bullets you could fire?
I think
with that
the
rule
first
mistake?
time we played as like teenagers, we just shot the whole ammo bin off in one turn. It's like, all right, you take 200 some damage, 400 damage, or 200 damage, and you're left with just a lump of a mech, because they still didn't have extra light engines, or it was funny, they didn't have case.
Yeah.
So
Woo.
you really start to learn those things fast, because it's just like, wait, wait, this doesn't make sense. This isn't fun anymore. And some of those things are correlated where you have a situation in a game and you don't have fun anymore because are you playing the rule correctly?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah,
is
yeah.
the rule or the mechanic overpowered or too underpowered? And it's just like, well, these guys don't have a chance, snowballs in hell of surviving. Is that relative to the situation? Maybe, maybe not. And the biggest thing we have been advocates about is you need to test it. You need to test it a lot. And if it doesn't make sense, perhaps you need to ask how and why and if it should change. Sometimes it sits right and sometimes you're not going to change anything. So it depends on, how much you want to take a bite on and try. It's not always going to be pansies and daisies and flowers all day. Some days it's going to be I'm really having a tough time with this. And so you reach out to people like, hey, does this make sense to you? Like, oh no. We did that like 3 years ago and we figured out and we asked and we found out that this is the way it should be played. Like, oh, I get it. The light bulb goes on and you carry on. And then you catch a fish, you feed yourself for a day. Teach people how to fish and you can feed thousands.
Yeah. I think I know the answer to if you had the power to retcon one thing in the BattleTech universe, what would it be? I assume it's going to be to allow machine guns to shoot 200 bullets each round. But assuming that you can't say that, I'll restate the question. Yeah.
I've heard a lot of things from different people and different opinions that, everybody else has said, this needs to be changed or that needs to be changed. And I can't really spout for one thing because they all have their place or they all have time on their side to develop. It's not just in stone. Some things can change. The longer the fictional universe goes on, or the longer the IP goes on, or the longer the gameplay happens, it should develop. And who knows? Maybe the game will develop, maybe not, 100% perfectly in our lifetime, but, nothing is perfect. Maybe in the future it'll be a lot better for my children or their children to play and to read about. One thing that sticks out, I guess.
I like how you're like so reluctant to say it.
Well, I still want to be respectful because like any writer or line developer or a rule book writer will, or editor will say, you're not in that position. You don't necessarily know what's happening in the mechanic of the process for development. And that's absolutely true. I could spout off opinions all day long, but that doesn't make me any smarter. That doesn't make me, any better or worse. I could talk about combat all day long because I've experienced maybe 2 active years of it. But that doesn't make me an expert.
Yeah.
That's just one small piece. But someone who, might spout off about conflict or have an opinion about conflict and, a combat zone who's never been there may have a little bit less to share in their opinion because the philosophy of deconstruction is you don't know what you don't know unless you've done it or you've been there.
So this answer then will frame this in the utmost respect for the developers. We understand it's hard and this is just a personal preference. If you're going to complain to BungleTech. Don't complain to Wolfnet. I pressured him to answer this.
We'll take any question and we'll take any opinion with a grain of salt. Even our own require a grain of salt. Nobody's perfect. So I really enjoy hearing sometimes that, what happened during the jihad? What happened? There's a lot of missing decades or more, and you see those spot checks, you see those overviews, and that's fine. You also have to understand possibly that it is a bunch of massacres and planets being obliterated. And there's so much. Like, how do you focus on all that? You probably have to have volumes to explain all of that. Like you hear about the Word of Blake, covering the whole jihad. It's massive. So how do you do that? Do you give a few snippets, a few overviews, a few fictional stories, a few field documents. There's enough for people to realize, like, yeah, there was a lot of genocide. So let's move on and get to the end of that era so we can start, the next.
So am I hearing that you would retcon the jihad to not have happened? That's what I hear you're implying. Personal preference.
And that's the question I asked myself. Would I?
I see.
I don't know if I would.
You're a philosopher.
There are some who would say so.
I just said it, so I am one of those some.
What else you got?
Well, no.
This is fun.
Cool. Well, that's yeah, so that's a big one. I mean, I understand what you're saying. It's not necessarily retconning the jihad out, but just perhaps.
Well, and the other part is I started to ask myself, would it be fiction? Would it be the IP? Would it be gameplay?
Mm-hmm.
Those are all loaded questions that are fun to dive into, and the rabbit hole does not end at all for any of those subjects. You can deep dive forever. I've seen players at this last Gen Con just weeks ago where they were basically debating at the table, bantering back and forth for 2.5 hours or an hour and a half during our doubles tournament, where basically it was like, which came first, this rule or this rule? How does it play out? What is the mechanic? How does it stack? And having the judges watch over, like, are you guys going to continue to play, or are you going to like? And you just see both of them not even look at him, just like, like, we're busy here debating this while they play, and that is the epitome of fun for Wolfnet, because whether you play the game for fun or whether you play the game for being semi-serious, we don't want it to be too serious because then people get a little rough.
Mm-hmm.
We'd rather have our primary rule is have fun and don't be a dick, and I think that is the epitome of the work that the five of us and countless other people who have helped to provide and inspire us. That's the name of our is have fun and just enjoy the time, because I've been told once before, we don't count time, we make time count. And the time you spend with people, whether it's even just you and I at this time, is well worth its weight.
Mm-hmm.
Because you establish connections, you establish friendships, you establish rapport, you work together for the better of a cause. There are some out there that will sit there and be, pretty rough to work with, and they just haven't found that mindset or that emotional set or that direction of, it's sometimes you can play casual, and casual is fun.
Oh yeah.
Competitive can be fun as well. And if you can live in both those worlds of casual and competitive play, you're going to have a blast. If you have trouble, ask what other players are doing. Find out how they deal with it. It's fun.
Mm-hmm. So if people want a sip of the Wolfnet soda, they haven't had a sip yet. Somehow they've heard about BungleTech, but they haven't heard about Wolfnet. In that rare chance, where can they find you and listen? Where can they get on board the Wolfnet train? Or do they just look up at the midnight sky, howl, and then they're automatically connected?
That was one of the topics of Gen Con, where Charles Gideon Dirks had asked, like, you send a wolf howl, I'll send it back. And it worked.
You're in Gen Con wolf howling?
It's in its infant stage of having, you're around 10,000 people. Do you want to interrupt their games by howling ridiculously loud and invigorating? Or do you give a little, Kit Fox wolf howl?
Yeah.
But you can reach us at WNRP@wolfstreetgames.com, YouTube, Discord, Tabletop Simulator, Patreon, Facebook, Queensboro. It gets kind of weird when you say there's a clothing line.
Whoa. Yeah.
But it's, completely unique.
That's cool. I didn't know that.
And we always tell people have a great evening and a pleasant tomorrow, because we hope and we look forward to tomorrow. We don't dwell on the past.
Mm-hmm. Well, my friend, this has been good. It's been really interesting, and I really appreciate you taking the time being here and sharing your story and your wisdom with the BungleTech audience. I know they need a little more wisdom than what we offer. So, it's
No, I think you're doing fine. I want to thank you for the time and opportunity, Nathan. It's been a blast. And I wish you luck and pleasant long life of a podcast.
Thank you, good sir. Let's end this in a howl. Wolfnet, form up. You at the end of that howl, you practiced that, obviously. You got throaty. It was really good.
It's more fun sometimes when you get a growl.
All right, my friend. Well, thank you for your time today.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. Star League Day is the most sacred holiday celebrated among the clans. It marks the assassination of Lord Richard Cameron. In general, the day is marked by widespread violence and rioting across clan and inner sphere worlds. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. And I'm now joined with the glorious Lee from the Calgary BattleTech League. Thank you for joining me today, Lee.
Hi-do, everybody.
So, Lee, I think I've already told you this, but the Calgary BattleTech League was one of my chief inspirations actually to create BungleTech, so I'm really excited to have you guys here. You rekindled my inspiration in BattleTech full force.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. Actually, the whole purpose of starting the Calgary BattleTech League, the league, as well as the Calgary BattleTech League YouTube channel, was to inspire people to play more and to get out and play and just create communities.
Your podcast is a little bit unique because it's also connected to the league, and you also manage a variety of podcasts. So how long has your podcast channel been active?
Well, when we first started back in 2021 for the third iteration of Calgary BattleTech League, because there's been 3 versions of it, we wanted to provide the players with something more than just a website where they saw the information or a Facebook page. The original league had a website where the scores were posted, where the scouting reports were laid out, where the after action reports were typed out. And Stu Angevine, who had started the league, he used to do these interviews, and he would send one of the players of the league a list of questions. And then he would play the interview, and it was all written out. None of it was audio. And he would purposely mess up their answers to make it funnier. So he would take the core of the question and then twist it to make it funny. And that was so entertaining. I loved that part. It was amazing to have that kind of feeling like you were in a bigger group just than the 24 players that we had. And the other thing about it was it made you feel like more part of the community. You looked forward to the day that you would be interviewed.
Very cool.
So in 2021, when we first started it, we decided to try podcasting. And yeah, I know YouTube it's not really a podcast. It's whatever, video channel, whatever. We call it a podcast. And we wanted to provide the players more content, and it's worked out pretty good. It's expanded way more than we thought it was going to. It's not huge. We don't have a ton of subscribers. We're sitting at just under 270 right now. But you know what? More than the 30 players that we have in league, I think we're doing fantastic to have that many viewers.
That's great. And how long has the league in general been active for?
See, that's the thing. There's been 3 iterations of league. The first one started in 1999 and ran for 6 seasons, so ended in 2006. That was under Stu and myself. I ran the last season of that. For the people who are in the Calgary area, you might know Bruce Ford. He's one of the major Catalyst agents for the area. He and I restarted the league up 2012 or something like that after about a 5-6 year hiatus. That ran for 4 seasons. And then we started up again in 2021 with Brett and myself running it, and we're now moving into the 3rd season starting in 2.5 weeks.
Awesome. Very, very cool. So you obviously run a variety of different podcasts. What's the story behind all their names?
Okay, well, first off, it's the CBL channel, the Calgary BattleTech League channel. That one was kind of easy to figure out because the product was supposed to be for the players. Then we decided partway through the first season of doing the show, well, we wanted a name for it, so we called it Uncivil Discourse. because it's supposed to be combat, so it's not very civil. So that's where we ended up calling it that, and we wanted it to be a bit of a Sportsnet type of thing. So there's different versions on different channels that you see that. We wanted to provide something similar. One of our shows for the first season was Killbox. That was from Jacques, who was voiced by one of our players, John, and he wanted to do a coach's corner or Don Cherry-esque like thing. So we did that. They were 15-minute shorts. And partway through that season, even, I think it's all kind of came together in the first season, we ended up with BattleTech, which was our way of just being able to come forward and just talk about BattleTech. It didn't have to be league related. It just had to be something that we enjoyed about originally BattleTech, and we've slowly stretched out to other forms of gaming too.
Very cool. We already discussed it, you already touched upon it a little bit, but let's elaborate more about specifically what your podcast aims to bring to the community.
That has to be broken down among the shows as well, because Uncivil Discourse is kind of focused on league members. We're trying to bring them the news and changes that have occurred from the last game day to the upcoming game day. And the purpose of that was to provide information, to provide some entertainment, and to basically just increase the community in Calgary. Calgary's a little bit of a cliquey is not the right word for it. I just think a lot of the Calgary BattleTech community just doesn't know about each other. So we figured by getting on YouTube, that might get some word out. We advertise on almost every Facebook channel that we can find that we have this channel, and we do it to spread the word. RambleTech was just Brett's and my way of showing our love to the game and to just talk our ideas. Like, we both have completely different viewpoints on certain tech, on certain ways of playing. And we just wanted to bring people's attention to that. Yeah, everybody plays differently, but everybody can enjoy the way they play. And Killbox, the aim for that one was literally just pure entertainment. John wanted to do something fun. I thought he had a great persona with Jacques. So I wanted to promote that as just something to listen to for 5-10 minutes and get a laugh.
I think I could answer this question, but I'm going to direct it to you. So what makes your podcast channel special or unique?
Well, one, because it's focused very specifically to the Calgary BattleTech League, with the other shows kind of spreading that out to other people. The other thing that makes it unique is that we have no idea what we're doing. Like, I think we're not professional in any way, shape, or form. We do our best to try to keep some form of a flow, but that's why we do RambleTech too. We can just go on all weird tangents. We just enjoy doing it. We're having fun with it, and I'm just hoping people enjoy listening to it.
Very cool. The question of the day. What is your favorite or most memorable BattleTech bungle?
Gee, there's so many of them. Do you know what a stack pull is?
I do.
Okay, so they've recently changed it and made it way weaker. But the very first time I ever did a DFA, taking a Phoenix Hawk and DFAing a Battlemaster. And of course, everybody else is still shooting at the Battlemaster. And somebody hit the ammo bin of the machine gun ammo in the Battlemaster. And of course, bullets are flying everywhere, internal damage, and the mech stack pulled from the engine hits. So we were trying to figure out, well, what happens to this poor Phoenix Hawk that's jumping into the fireball that was once this Battlemaster? And it's the first time I've ever seen a mech actually take the full stack pull damage, other than the mech that's actually stack pulling. Because the damage is 100% the engine rating in the hex that's in, or at least it used to be, and then half. Yeah, this poor Phoenix Hawk ate like 360 points of damage. It was just nothing. It was just vapor.
Did you ever DFA again?
I don't DFA. It's a desperation move. It's not intended to be a actual combat tactic. The Highlander burial is a myth. It's as bad for the mech doing it as it is for the mech receiving it. So, yeah, no, I don't DFA if I can avoid it. I'll do it if I have no more weapons or it's the last ditch, last round. I gotta beat this guy. Yeah, otherwise I refuse.
Well, this next question is perfect for you because you run a competitive BattleTech league. So you should know what the optimal urban mech loadout is. What is it?
See, this is the problem. You're asking me to bite on the meme that I don't even agree with. I hate urban mechs, but the most optimal one is the Arrow 4. It's basically you're paying for the Arrow 4, right? Like that's what you're paying for. It's an Arrow 4 with legs. It's extreme and it's useful. Like, really, when you think about it, it's a technical. Like it's a truck with a machine gun bolted on it. Well, it's a mech. It's a loader mech with an artillery piece loaded on it. So I like the one with the Arrow 4 because you don't have to be fast. You can get to where you're going to go and just stand there and hit the big red button and fire the cruise missiles at your opponent 5 map words away. And you don't have to worry about anybody coming at you.
Okay, well, if that's the optimal urban mech loadout, what is the optimal urban mech pilot name?
You know, I was thinking about this for quite a while because you did give me the questions a little bit ahead of time, so I'd be slightly aware of them. This one I had to think about for quite a while. I would name him Oscar T. Grouch.
Oh, that's great, actually. There must be a meme with that out there, with Oscar the Grouch popping out of a urban mech.
The most recent one I've seen was a tracked recycle bin with a machine gun strapped to it.
Awesome. Well, I must admit that I was seduced by the Urbi a long time ago. I don't know how it happened, and it is a deep, dark shame of mine, but it exists. It exists.
People can enjoy what they like, and you know what? There are places for the urban mech. I just don't understand the absolute fascination with it. It's like at one point in time, the Charger was everybody's fascination mech, that they were going to make this Charger work. And back in the day, I've been playing this game a long time. The technical limitations of what the tech they provided you to be able to build, you could not make a Charger work and it still be a Charger. It turned into something else as soon as you started playing with it. So seeing people fall in love with the urban mech, you know, great. All the power to you. It's just not my thing.
So if people want to find your stuff and listen to it, is YouTube the best place?
Absolutely. We do dabble with Spotify and stuff like that. We haven't really got very far into that, but yeah, YouTube is the best place to find it. You can also find us on Facebook, either through the Calgary BattleTech Facebook group or the Calgary BattleTech League Facebook group. And we post all of our links to our videos there. And then, of course, YouTube under the Calgary BattleTech League.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this, and thank you again for facilitating and managing a league that it's very detail-oriented. It's so clear that you guys put so much heart and administrative volunteer effort into it. It's just amazing. From my knowledge of the BattleTech world, and from what I've seen about, you know, different tournaments, different organizations, it has to be one of the most well-driven and passionate competitive communities out there, in my opinion. So thank you for all your volunteer efforts. Thank you for being there and making me realize, because like I said, I was in one of those silos that thought no one else played BattleTech until I walked into all these BattleTech players. I'm like, oh my God, it exists. It's the promised land.
And like I said, Calgary's got actually a huge BattleTech community. It's just we don't seem to know where the other ones are. I just recently learned about the ones at Imaginary Games.
Yeah.
That's a big group there. Like there's a bunch of people in Calgary doing it. So it's just a matter of continuing to reach out and build that community. And I'm glad we were able to help you, Nate.
Heck yeah. Well, Lee, you honor me being here. Thank you very much for your time today.
It's a major pleasure being here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. The 50-ton Raider is an experimental battle mech designed and built by Banson Universal Unlimited. Unfortunately, due to challenges during development, BUU was unable to develop a viable fusion reactor and could not secure a source of assembled reactors for use with the prototypes. Instead, the mech was redesigned around a 200-rated internal combustion engine. Though unconventional, the mech proved moderately successful as a cheap and effective frontline trooper. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm super excited because I am now joined with Shrapnel from Battletopia Stories. Shrapnel, how you doing, man?
I'm all good, thanks, buddy. How are you?
Very well, thank you very much. Especially because I have you here, a fellow fiction reader.
Hey! Yeah. We like to read words.
We love to read words.
We read words so you don't have to.
I know people hate to read words, so I will read words for them.
Exactly.
So let's talk a little bit about your podcast. How long has your podcast been active for?
I actually had to look this up because I had no idea. I started it apparently on the 11th of February, 2022, which means I've missed my 1-year anniversary by quite some time.
Okay, so you're a year and a half in.
Yeah, can't believe it's been going that long already.
And you release stories quite frequently. I think you post a story almost once every 2 weeks or something like that.
I tried to. I've slowed a bit down recently because life's been taking the front seat, but I hope to get back in. And I was doing one a week at one time, which was pretty hectic.
I imagine.
I think the most I've done was 32 in 2 and a bit weeks, which was the Tukiyid run.
Ah, yes, I remember listening to that. It's very fun.
That was manic.
I imagine. So, what does your podcast aim to bring to the community?
It's for people that don't want or don't have time to listen to the long form stories, because BattleTech's been around for so long now. In every single source book, there's always a couple of tales in there that no one no one reads or remembers, but actually they're quite pivotal to how everything fits together. So I just thought, oh, this is really cool. It fills in lots of little blanks. If you go on Sana, you'll see loads of references that no one ever looks up, and it's been summarized in like a word or a sentence. So I just thought, we'll bring that in. People can press play. It's 6, 10 minutes long, whatever. Some of them are only 2.5. And it's just something to listen to. Keep the juices flowing for BattleTech.
Do you have a lore focus? I mean, everything you do is obviously lore because Battletech is a fictional universe.
Yeah.
But sometimes I think you've done some readings on the actual mechs. Sometimes you've done more stories like focused on your Tukiyid, for example. Is there a specific focus you have in this area regarding the type of fiction and lore you like to share?
Nope. I just tried to cover the whole thing. I started off just doing the stories. And then I did the Hellbringer, I think it was, the Sana's BattleMech article. I enjoyed the story at the beginning because it was like the proper old radio tales that you used to listen to.
Mm-hmm.
And I just heard it in my head. So I just made it. So I'm now working with Sana doing a couple of those. That's more like the lore based, but everything else is just story, really. I'm trying to stay away from the lore. Everyone does the lore, and there's some very good people that I can't compete with. So I'm just not even going to bother. I much prefer the story stuff.
So, on the topic of stories, what's the story behind your name?
It's a weird one. I couldn't think of anything. So I tried loads of random name generators. And then one night, my wife just went, Battletopia. I went, that's kind of cool. And then we throw stories on the end of it because the original plan was to cover lots of different gaming systems. So I was going to do 40K, I was going to do fantasy, I was going to do Battletech, and I've just fallen down the Battletech ladder completely. And I don't think I've done anything else but Battletech so far. I will one day, but I'm really enjoying Battletech stuff right now. It's just sucked me in.
Actually, today I double checked your channel's description. I'm like 40K. And I'm
Yeah,
like,
don't read the description, people. Don't read the description.
I was like looking through. I'm like, I'm pretty sure this is all BattleTech. And yeah, it's 100% BattleTech. Maybe you warm up behind the scenes by reading a 40K story, and then you're like, but I'm not going to record this. I only record the good, cool lore.
I do like the Battletech style of writing, just the short stories. 40K is a lot more involved and grim, dark, and sometimes it's hard because it's always Space Marines shouting at things. Battletech, you have a lot more nuances. You can follow an elemental. You could follow a mech warrior that's walking around a mech bay instead of fighting. There's a bit of everything. So I just think it's a lot more range involved in the stories.
One thing I've actually been curious about is, so in my podcast, I read stories focused on Shrapnel, the official BattleTech magazine. I don't think I've seen you read a story from Shrapnel. Have you?
I have done one, which was requested by someone in the comments. It's Doc Benz from Shrapnel 4, I think it was. It's my longest running one, 45 minutes, I think, all in all.
That's long.
Yeah, I was way out of my depth when I made that. I'm happy to admit now.
I feel like it's sort of a missed opportunity. Shrapnel reading Shrapnel stories. You know what I mean?
I didn't even know Shrapnel was real until later on when I picked my Shrapnel name. I knew something about BattleTech, but nothing recent. I just went, oh, that sounds cool. And then I found out about the magazine after people going, do you do this? It's like, no.
That's funny. So, what makes your podcast special or unique?
I've tried to go away from narrative stories and lobbing in some sound effects to bring up the immersion. So, you can kick back and not always listen to this voice. You can have, a couple of pew-pews in the background, a bit of atmospheric music. Like I say, I fell in love with the old radio stories like the Charles Chilton's Journey into Space and that kind of thing. When they did it live on radio and they added in the music and everything, I was trying to capture that little bit of magic, which hopefully I've done. People tell me I've done, but I don't know. I always try to do a little bit better on each reading, something a bit different and change it up.
Well, I definitely think that you're correct that audio productions or sort of radio dramas
Yeah.
are few and far between in the podcast community. Really, it's only, from my experience, it's you and me that are actually really doing that stuff because it's a lot of work. Like adding sound effects.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
I think on Doc Ben's, I spent an hour doing 3 minutes on one part of it.
That's very believable. Yeah.
Yeah, by the time you've sourced all the sounds and you've mixed it down and you leveled everything and you queued everything, and it was just like, wow.
Committed now, baby.
Going from like 3 minutes to 40 odd, it was just, it was a learning curve.
For sure. You know, our podcast is focused on making mistakes. So I have to ask you, because it's on our brand, what your favorite BattleTech bungle is or has been.
This is where it's going to be a bit disappointing for you, I think, because I'm a member of a relatively new group. We've been going for about a year, and it's a mix of completely new guys like myself and then the old guys. But the old guys haven't played for a while. So they're using it as an experience to basically like upskill and update their knowledge whilst we're learning at the same time. So there's a lot of, we basically live in the books because I'll ask a stupid question and they'll go, oh, I think it's this. And then someone else will go, oh, no, it's this. And then we have to go to Total War and read up on it. We haven't made that many bungles, fortunately, so far. We've done some small ones like, I don't know why. I thought quads could push. I thought that would make sense because it's basically like a shoulder charge, isn't it?
A push, I think you need hands to do it. Yeah, in the rules, I think.
Yeah, you read the fluff and it's like, it describes it as a shoulder charge kind of thing. So I ran a Scorpion up a hill to go push a commando off a level 3 cliff into the water. And then I found out when I got there I couldn't do it and it got shot to hell. That's about the worst I've done so far. Because we're all learning at the same time, we're pretty much living in the books and we haven't gone to advanced rules yet because that's just scary. Someone in our group just wants advanced rules for the arrow and artillery. He's not happy with like battlefield support points. He wants the proper things on the board. Sorry, we haven't fluffed up yet.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Running up the hill and failing to push. I mean, that commando must have been scared shitless for a few seconds. Like, oh my God, he's running up. He has a master plan in his head, and they just stopped and froze and stared him down. He's like, oh, I guess I'm gonna large laser you now. Pew!
My opponent just sat there smugly and went, you can't do that. And I went, what?
That bastard. Smugly.
What do you mean I can't push? Surely every mech can push. This guy died in the end anyway. Got shot.
So, as an individual who's ingrained in the lore and the stories, this question is perfect for you. In your opinion,
okay,
and I want your opinion. I want your factual opinion. I want you to deliver this like this is a factual thing, even though it's your opinion. Forget I said opinion.
I'll do it in my best BBC accent.
Which faction or leader should control Terra?
No Clanner. And Innisphere houses Prince Julian from Fedcom. It's about the only one I would go for right now in the Ill Clan era.
Oh, damn.
Send your hate mail to Nathan, not me. He asked.
He said it factually. It was an opinion question. Why did he say it factually?
I really struggle with the great houses. I love all the stories around them, but I can't get behind any of them really. When it comes to the Ill Clan era, I haven't read huge amounts around it, but I really struggle with the whole new Star League Ill Clan thing right now. I need to do a lot more reading. I need a lot more time to read. Maybe I'll do some stories. That's the only way I can do it. Well, who do you reckon should rule Terra then?
It's not about me. It's about you.
Oh, no, come on. Put your money where your mouth is.
I think that
yes,
they should retcon some things. One of my favorite characters should take control of Terra.
And who's that?
And that's Catherine Steiner Davian.
I don't know much about Catherine Steiner Davian.
She's like Cersei. She's like the worst of the worst. She's so evil and she's so arrogant and she's so cocky and I love her so much. Just put her in control of Terra. It's going to be so much fun, guys.
Well, if we're doing retcons, bring back Word of Blake. They can have Terra.
There you go. That's probably more political than Catherine Steiner Davian. Word of Blake. Okay, there we go. From Shrapnel.
Word of Blake are just misunderstood.
Once again, that's Battletopia Stories. You can send your hate mail to him.
Please don't.
Yeah, don't send hate mail. Just send random symbols, and then he'll
Oh
interpret
no,
it.
please don't.
Random symbols. He'll look at, ... What could that be implying?
Oh, someone's sending me knives. Wonder what that's about.
That's Catherine.
Oh, this
Catherine
one's a
sent you
hatchet.
those, in case you're wondering. When Catherine heard you said Word of Blake instead of her.
I'm gonna have to read up on her now.
Oh, she's so much fun and so...
This is the problem. Do you find this at BattleTech? You hear a name and you're like, oh, I'll just go to Sana. And you go to Sana, you read up on her, and then it's just like another little link, then another one, then another one, then another one, then another
Yeah.
one, and then another one. And you're like, oh, an hour's gone.
It's endless.
What have I learned? Too much information to retain.
And as well, the wiki format is great for specific stuff, but
Oh,
sometimes you
superb.
need to be lost in the story to really appreciate the character. Like, if I read Catherine
Absolutely.
on Sarna, I mean, she's clearly a bad guy, but I love her because of how she acts. Oh, she's just so entitled, and she thinks she's the smartest, but she's not. And she blames everybody else, but she is good at certain... Oh, yeah, she's just a great antagonist.
Yeah.
Yeah, like literally, she's Cersei before Cersei was a thing. So she's Space Cersei.
Yeah, this is what I love about BattleTech. It's all so nuanced, and there's so much behind every character. It's even like the throwaway ones. There's huge amounts of character behind them. That's the only reason I went with Prince Julian. I was having a quick search this morning. Basically, he just leads from the front, and he never wanted to be Prince. And he's just like, put me in a battle mech. I don't want to be Prince. He's like, no, you go lead the charge and reclaim New Avalon and all the other places that you've just lost. It's like, okay, he loses a leg, he loses an eye, he gets beat up, he gets 4 mechs shot out of him in the campaign. And that's just on Sana in one paragraph. And now I'm just like, I need to know more.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even know him before this.
Crazy. Very cool.
Yeah.
So if people want to hear your podcast, they want to hear your stories, where's the best place they can find you?
You can find me on YouTube, Battletopia Stories. I'm on Spotify. I'm on Apple. I'm on most of the podcast platforms. We'll be on Amazon soon, hopefully. So just give us a search. I've got an Insta if you want to see some behind the scenes stuff and some of the games I play and everything else. That's Battletopia Stories too on Insta. YouTube is my main thing though, right now. If you want to see some pretty pictures to go with stuff.
All right, dude. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be here. This has been awesome fun.
Thank you for having me on. I love you guys on the podcast. It keeps me entertained no end.
You honor us, good sir.
I've got to say as well, your readings just like, I listen to it and I just go, he's so good. There's no jealousy. It's just rage.
Rage. Perfect.
Rage.
Perfect. You'll fit right into the universe that Catherine Steiner rules.
Long live Catherine.
Long live Catherine.
Let's make it happen, CGL. Come on.
Bring her back. Make her immortal somehow. I don't know.
Word of Blake turned her into a cyborg after she's been frozen for a bit or something. There we go. Put her on a massive throne. She can't leave it. Basically writes itself, doesn't it?
There we go.
And everyone's happy.
And then literally, then everyone is happy.
Planners go away. Hey, perfect.
She actually sort of allies with Clan Wolf, so
Oh, boo.
they can stay, but rename them Clan Lapdog.
Clan Pup.
Cool, man. Well, this has been super fun. Thank you so much for the time.
Awesome. Thank you for having me on.
I'm Professor Michael, presenting more of The Sphere We Live In. The venerable nunchaku are a primitive but deadly weapon which sometimes sees use in the Draconis Combine. Though simply a pair of wooden or metal rods joined by a chain, they can inflict injuries comparable to a katana, although they lack any sort of armor-penetrating capabilities. Now you know about the sphere we live in.
Welcome back, everybody. I'm now joined with the legendary Carrie from the Unicorn Company podcast. Carrie, thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It is truly a pleasure to have you here. Your podcast has been around for quite a while, I believe. I know you have quite a few episodes. How long have you been active for?
I've been doing it for about 2 years. I started it because of, Wolfnet.
Nice. So I have to ask, what's the story behind your name?
Well, the name, it comes from a couple things. One, I like historical stuff, and I was playing Napoleonics for a while, and I learned about a type of unit called a unicorn battery, which was a type of artillery battery. And if you look in BattleTech, you have, like, light horse, you have, heavy cav, light cav, cuirassiers, you have all these different unit types, and they generally don't really translate that well from historical to BattleTech, and there weren't any but, unicorn type units, and I was like, I like unicorns. Um, it's an easy mascot to do. Also, I'm part Scottish, and the national animal of Scotland is the unicorn, which I think is awesome. They picked a mythical creature as their national animal.
I did not know that. That's rad.
England has the lion, and Scotland's like, yeah, no, we get the unicorn. Yeah, so I mean, that's pretty much what led to the name, and, the unicorn on our logo is called Morrigan, which is in memory of one of my partners who passed away. She had gotten me a unicorn for Valentine's Day one time, and I named it Morrigan. It was like, "Alright, this is Morrigan." So, kind of to remember her, the unicorn on the logo is partially a representation of the gift she got me, like, 3, 4 years ago.
Wow. That's a super beautiful and cool way to honor someone's legacy.
Yeah, I think so, and it's something little I can do that hopefully helps remember her, at least for me.
Well, now everyone else's logo is stupid in in comparison to yours. No one else had meaning for the logo like that, so you win. So I'm curious, you say that from a historical perspective, unicorn battalions, or what were they called
They
again?
were unicorn batteries. They were a type of artillery battery. They were used by, I wanna say, the French and the Russians during the Napoleonic era, and the unicorn was the type of gun that they used or had referenced the type of gun that they used. But, yeah, like, I wanna say there's what is it? Oh, I can't remember the unit name now, but there's a cuirassiers unit, and cuirassiers were a type of French cavalry. So I feel like it's fitting that I should pull something from historical context to be part of that name.
Mhm.
Even though, yeah, no, I don't use artillery ever, but what the hell?
That's cool. I mean, unicorns are great. Have you seen, I think it's called the movie, I always forget her name, Brie Larson, Unicorn Store, I think it's about.
I have not seen that. No.
It's actually very, very fun. I'd recommend it. Samuel L. Jackson. I know I'm pronouncing her name wrong. Brie Larson. I think I am. I love her. But anyhow, it's a really fun movie. It really captures the magic of the unicorn. Pretty amazing. Yeah. So, what does your podcast aim to bring to the community? Everyone's a little bit different, and I want to hear your perspective.
The main thing is a different perspective. A lot of the podcasts out there are very much biased towards a viewpoint from guys. But yeah, you have everything ranging from the extreme vitrolic neckbeard to just normal guys, but it's all dudes. I want to say the only other podcast, and it's pretty recently that I've seen them come out, is Battle Babes, out of Canada, and it's fun listening to them and listening to explore the game as they get into it. I've been around a really long time, so for me, it's not so much exploring like getting into it, but exploring things that I've already seen and dealt with in the community. And I want to be able to not only introduce BattleTech to hopefully people who wouldn't have heard of it, but also the other thing about it is it's for people like me, for LGBTQ players, it's something that they can listen to and relate to
Mm-hmm.
and lets them know that they are accepted in the community, regardless of what some people may say or do.
I think it's your mandate where you are about making BattleTech more inclusive. That's one of your goals, I believe, in the description of your podcast, correct?
Oh, exactly. Yes. I want it to be far more inclusive than what we've seen. And part of that is from my experience at conventions and games in person. And another part of it comes from having seen the discourse over on the 40K side when they started flipping out about what they would refer to as hobby tourists and all that, where like somebody might bring up female space marines and they totally lose their minds. So, having seen that discourse and how bad it got over at the 40K side of things, there needs to be some kind of voice that's not that.
It's definitely a heavily laden bro voice podcast
Mhm.
community. Yeah, it's interesting because when you're talking about inclusion in BattleTech, I understand that the BattleTech community in general and a collective seems to be very inclusive, and definitely that's the messaging, especially the messaging from Catalyst, which is really interesting. But I've always found it interesting how the lore and the writing is it's old school still. It
Mhm.
like I don't like how many, non-heterosexual characters are there in the BattleTech universe? Are there many? Like none come to mind, to be honest.
Well, there's not many. I don't know if you've read Foxtails.
I haven't, but I've heard of it.
That entire group, that entire mercenary unit is either full on LGBTQ or they are allies.
I see. That's cool.
It is absolutely awesome. They actually dropped the logo for Fox Patrol today or yesterday. Brian Young had it on his Twitter. He wrote that book and it is very inclusive and it's awesome. And what's funny is like even without the LGBTQ representation, BattleTech as a whole, you have like a matriarchal society in the magistry. You've had several women as rulers in the Lyran Commonwealth. Heck, one of the main characters in was it Wolves on the Border, I believe, was a black samurai.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, we can have all this. We should be able to have queer characters in the universe as well. I mean, nobody should bat an eye at that.
Yeah, I sort of think that, the literature is pretty old. Like there's new stuff coming out, obviously, for example, like Foxtails, but the old stuff, really struggled with lots of these stereotypes. And I think it was in the Renegade HPG podcast, they were interviewing an old writer and he was saying he came in to combat the concept of the yellow menace
Mhm.
that was being presented. Yeah, I've just always wondered about the characters because I only can think of one character that was identified as trans in the BattleTech universe, and that was from actually the Harebrained Schemes video game. I remember it was a pilot that you could get. Yeah, anyhow, they were pretty cool. But I remember it came to me my attention, and I was like, when I was reading it, I'm like, oh. And then I thought to myself, I'm like, wow, you're right. Like the fact that I saw it and it was flagged to me, I was like, wow, there really is or does seem to be underrepresentation. That's exciting to hear that there's actually, other stories coming out and different voices being told. So that's nice.
Yeah. In fact, I'm okay. So I don't know if this counts as another trans character. I am in, the little booklet you get with the Clan Invasion source book, the little story,
Yes. Yeah.
Bonds of Battle. I am in there.
You're in there as like a character in the universe?
Yes.
Oh, cool.
Uh-huh. It's before I changed my last name. It's when it used to be Shumar. And in there, it refers to me in the feminine and everything. And then, of course, they flubbed up and referenced me as a he. So I like to think that maybe I am a trans character in the BattleTech universe, at least
That's
during the
cool.
clan invasion.
Were you part of the clans or the inner sphere?
Inner Sphere, I was with and I wanna eventually write a shrapnel story about it. I'm in the DCMS on I can't remember the name of the world. It's the one where they poisoned the water supply to try to kill off the clans,
Hmm.
not thinking the clans might know how to purify water. And I'm like a 2E, I believe, in the DCMS of all places. So I really want to eventually expand on that. And there's part of me that's like, it'd be interesting to be the one that does the poisoning, only to find out that this doesn't work.
Yeah, and I wonder how the DCMS, like what their culture is regarding gender, because it's based on sort of the traditional sort of core Japanese imperialistic sort of ideologies.
The way I've seen it depicted, the higher you get in the society, like the closer you are to the coordinator, the more it is like ancient imperial Japan, where people are wearing kimonos and the makeup and everything for formal occasions. And but then as you start getting down to the common person, it depicted like seems more to be like, can you do your job? And presentation is probably just like depending on how you present. Up until you get to the royal court, I don't think anybody, at least in the military part, is going to care as long as you can do your job.
Cool. Yeah, so we sort of touched upon it already, but specifically, is there something else you'd like to call out regarding what makes your podcast special or unique in your eyes?
So I listened to a lot of texts, and one thing I noticed with him was that he always had like St. Jude or something as like a donate link. And instead of doing that, I've actually used the podcast as a platform to raise money for the Trevor Project for the past this year and last year. Between the 2 years, we've raised about $15,000, and we do a raffle for a bunch of BattleTech products. We had like this year, I don't remember all the sponsors, but we did have Catalyst on board with us,
Wow.
which was awesome. Last year we had Michael Stackpole. Oh God, he sent us a first edition printing signed of the Warrior trilogy.
Whoa.
Yeah, that was something that I had in my hands. It was like when Indy gets to touch the Grail, it's like I can't keep it, but I am touching it.
That's really cool. That's really cool. Yeah, that's a lot of money in 2 years, especially. It's a huge charitable donation.
Oh yeah, and I'm still getting all the addresses to mail out all the prizes. Right now, I've got people in Scotland, Canada, and the U.S. who won this year. But yeah, I do. It's internationally available to whoever wants to enter. And sometimes it's like in the back of my head, there is always the, oh, please don't be really expensive to mail.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It always surprises me too. I remember I once shipped a video game to an Australian friend from Canada, and I was
hmm
like, wow, this was remarkably more expensive than I thought it would be. But at the same time, it is going all the way to Australia, so I can understand. I can understand.
Well, that's like I remember a couple of years ago, I do commission painting and stuff. I had someone commission some stuff. I bought the minis for him and everything, and he was in Canada, and I went to mail it, and it was during COVID, and they were like, "Yeah, Canada's not accepting mail right now." I'm like, "Hold up, what?"
Oh, yeah, I remember. We weren't accepting mail from the States for a while. Yeah.
Yep. So like international shipping can get really fun sometimes when it's like a country's like, "Yeah, no, we're not taking your mail," and I'm like, "Oh, let me let the person know, and we'll figure this out."
That's hilarious. Damn Canada. Blame Canada, man. That South Park song was right. Ugh. So I have to ask, do you have a favorite BattleTech bungle or mistake that pops to mind? Something that really has stuck with you across the years?
Okay, so there's two of them, if you don't mind. One's BattleTech, one's Alpha Strike, which I focus a lot on Alpha Strike. The BattleTech one is when I first started playing. So I was like 14, 15, and I somehow got my friend to play with me. And we did not understand ammunition properly.
Okay.
So we're like looking at certain designs, and it's like, okay, LRM-20, how much ammo is it? How much ammo is there for it? Okay, there's 6. Well, obviously, you need to have 20 missiles to shoot. So we totally misunderstood ammunition. It wasn't like per salvo. It was, this is how many missiles are in there.
So you're like everything shortchanged.
Exactly.
I know that the BattleTech universe is like, in the Succession Wars, are like things are tight, but to only be able
hmm
to have 6 missiles in my LRM-20, that seems a little bit extreme.
Right. And I mean, there was that, and we eventually figured it out, thank goodness. But the other thing is Alpha Strike, which I've played Alpha Strike since before it was Alpha Strike. I played when it was called Quick Strike, and it was literally taking the Battle Force units and translating them over to their individual stat lines and playing them individually on a table with like a loose set of rules that was in, oh God, I forget, it was in one of the books. But I should know just about everything there is to know about Alpha Strike. And last year, or no, year before last, I was at a tournament, and this guy kept dropping his elementals out of helicopters and then putting them back in the helicopters while they were flying,
Hmm.
which I learned later on. I learned like the night after that game. I was like, that's kind of weird.
Yeah.
And that was key to him winning the game. That night, me and my friend were talking about it, and she goes, "You know what? No, no, that's not right." And we looked through the rule book and it's like, "Oh my God, he that was illegal the whole game. And he didn't realize it because his whole strategy was built around it, and I didn't realize it. It was like, okay, yeah, they're leaping back up to the helicopter, but it was like, oh no, no, that's yeah, that's not right. I should know that.
Just imagine those are some super skilled elementals in the helicopter pilot, like counterbalancing. Man,
Right?
those are aces. I mean, they
Yeah, I
are in the
mean,
clan, so of course. Of course. They're probably Steel Viper. That's probably why it worked out. Yes.
yeah, Steel Vipers and Nova Cats were big into dropping troops, I believe.
There you go.
Nova Cats tried to show that off at Tukid, and that didn't work so well when their dropships got shot down in the process.
We don't talk about Tookie yet. Not in Calgary. All right, well, that's freaking awesome. The ammo one's actually totally relatable. I can totally understand how someone can make that mistake, and then other one is crazy and fun. But yeah, I have to ask, really curious about this. If you had the power to retcon one thing in the BattleTech universe, anything, what would it be and why?
So if I could retcon anything in the universe, and that's a tough one there. A lot of in my head, the Blakist era. And yeah, a lot of people would probably lean towards, if they could retcon the Dark Age out of existence or whatever. To me, the Blakist era, if I could, I wouldn't remove it from existence or anything, but I feel like it was very heavy-handed in a lot of what they did. Like, there were mercenary units that were accidentally wiped out because, Herb Bayes had written in one of the books that a nuke went off on this planet. And, after some fact checking, it was like, "Oh, shoot, I think it was the Black Thorns."
Oh.
I might be wrong. They were apparently on that planet according to every canon source at the time,
Oh.
and it was just like, "Oops, um, we killed off the Blackthorns. Sorry about that." It's like, yeah, no, I would definitely retcon it and make them have more of a build-up, because it was sprung on us, and yeah, it was supposed to be a secret army and everything, but I feel like by the time it happened, we would have seen far more Blakist influence in things, and there would have been more signs. We have seen things in source books from intelligence agencies about Blakist buildups and weird things that are coming out of there. And the developers did say, oh, there were clues, but the only place you really saw clues were like in some of the Comstar source book and stuff like that, where it was like not enough to really give you an idea that, hey, guess what? This faction that's kind of off to the side, they're a superpower.
I see. So they sort of just chucked him in there a little bit, eh?
They kind of shoehorned him in.
Slipped them under the rug. You can understand when you're writing in the BattleTech universe, you create this epic story, you nuke a planet. Later, you dig deep into the lore and you're like, wow, well, the Black Thorns were located there. Well, that's a thorn in my side. Ha 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 ha. I wrote something for Shrapnel recently, submitted it. It hasn't been published yet, but the research process was so intense. And, I've written before, it comes relatively natural to me. But the amount of research I had to do, it was like
Right.
3 times the amount of research to the writing just to make sure I was fact checking everything. And like, there'd be like and I was writing about the Steel Vipers. And so there'd be a piece of
Hmm.
information about them here, a paragraph in a single book. And then I have to go to another book and find another paragraph and just making sure I'm correlating everything and using Sarna and all that stuff. And oh man, that was tough. So I feel for the unintentional purge of the Black Thorns, which are a cool mercenary unit too. I mean, I only know about them actually from the probably enough from the card game.
Huh.
Their card game ability is really cool. It's a unique ability. So I'm like, ooh, what's this unit? And they look sort of badass too. And the name Black Thorns, come on, that's cool.
Yeah, I do know, like with the research thing, when I start digging into stuff, it gets really, really interesting. And I like the long form videos that Tech does. I don't know how much research they have to put into that. So, one of the things that I do, or I'm sort of semi-retired from it, is you mentioned Sarna. When they first started building Sarna, I had decided I was going to work with another wiki called MechWikia, which is still around, but it's not nearly as comprehensive. And I was just entering mechs. And I ended up coming on to Sarna as the lead of the mech project to get the initial mechs and everything in. And the amount of research was not as much, thank God. I think at the time Project Phoenix was out. So like the Marauder and the classics, there wasn't as much to research, but there still was a lot of stuff to dig into with it. That's one of the things that I'm really proud of. But at the same time, there were hours and hours and hours of writing. And then, we had a team. And of course, like, it'd be like I'd write stuff and then somebody come back and like, hey, I just caught an error in here from this tech readout or from whatever source. And then I have to go back and re-edit. And it was a pain in the butt.
That's one thing that's really amazing about the BattleTech community, I think, is the fandom has so many dedicated people that just are willing to write and like critique and spend hours volunteering time.
Mm-hmm.
Not that it should necessarily be volunteered, but but like you have all levels of contribution, which I think it's amazing. Yeah, Sarna was my mind, and now that I know you were the lead of the mech team, you know how many times I reference Sarna when I'm trying to find design quirks, like all the time, all the time.
Well, what I find really hard when I do my mech tech segments, I have to not quote myself from Sarna.
That's funny.
So I'm like writing up about a mech, and usually they're pretty quick little segments, but it's like, okay, I can't say what I said here on this entry because then I'm just repeating what it says on Sarna, which in some cases are my own words.
That's hilarious. The problem most people don't have, the fear of quoting themselves.
Right?
Well, usually like famous philosophers and those are the type of people that worry about this, but you got to the level deep into the BattleTech lore.
Oh yeah, no, like I've been into when FASA collapsed, there was a group on Merc. We kept the game alive for a while on internet relay chat until it was picked up by FanPro, and that was like the dark times. Like they talked about a dark age in BattleTech, and we literally had a dark age in BattleTech after FASA fell. And I say fell like it was New Avalon, but yeah, after they collapsed and all their mistakes. But yeah, I was with that, and then I was with BattleTechUniverse.org, which they're still around, but for a while, when forums were a big thing on the internet, I was in charge of they had a technical readout part of the page. There were a few sites that had it, and I was the one that people would submit them, and I would have to manually enter them in the system.
Ooh.
Yeah, so there were, like, hundreds of custom designs that I was just sitting there manually entering all, like, "Get off work, I'm bored, let me start manually entering this." 'Cause it's not like I could take a laptop to work or do stuff on my phone back then, you
Mm-hmm.
know? Yeah, so I got to see that end of it as it slowly got resurrected and brought back to life by FanPro and Catalyst, and, it's BattleTech, it's been around a while, and it hopefully with the new stuff coming out, the new books, the miniatures especially, it's gonna be around for a long time. My only fear is that, like, in 15 years, they're gonna look at having to refresh the line again if they keep going this route,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like, "Oh, that'll be a pain in the butt."
Yeah. It's funny that we can look that far down the road, though, the fact that I'm 40 now and I've been engaged with BattleTech since I was probably 10 to a different
Mm.
degree than you, for sure. Like I was definitely more casual. Like I had the books and technical readouts, you know what I mean? The same thing I tried to make my friends play with me, but they're like, this is too many rules. And I'm like, but we're mechs.
Mhm.
But it's crazy that we can actually say that. It's like, oh man, in 15 years, I sure hope they don't do a reboot.
Right? Or even just like a refresh of all the models because like you look at games like 40K and I want to say War Machine, but War Machine sort of fell on hard times and hasn't really come back. Models are constantly getting refreshed in those lines. One of the problems with the game, but it's also one of the most wonderful things about it, is the number of designs, the number of chassis that exist. Because of that plethora of chassis, you can have two people play each other and they have none of the same mechs. And, that's awesome. But at the same time, retailers, for example, like the metal, I want to say Raw Partha, but it's Ironwind Metals, that line is so big that carrying it is, you have like hundreds of different chassis. Whereas with other games, it's like, okay, so you have Space Marine Lieutenant, and in 5 years, he'll get redone with a different pose and everything else. With us, it's like Yeah, no, refreshing the line is a multi-year project, and I mean, I'm not working in there, but I know some people who do. That's like a whole multi-year thing where you have to go through and do hundreds and hundreds of different chassis. It's not like tons of the same model on the table, you know?
Yeah. And I think that the chassis and the models, how they're designed, there's such uniqueness built in that just makes it extra challenging in many ways. Like it's not like they're just it's easy to regurgitate. There's so much diversity in there, and they want things to be unique enough. You know, Marauder comparison to a Marauder 2
Mm-hmm.
or Marauder 2C, those three. They're all very distinct looking despite them being very similar. And then if that evolves further, like how can they, make sure the future Marauder doesn't look like the Marauder 2C now? That sounds like a little bit like hell to me.
Oh, yeah. The other thing that's interesting, you mentioned the Marauder, Marauder 2C, and the Marauder 2. I remember when the Marauder 2 was literally the same miniature as the Marauder with wings glued to the back.
I remember that. I didn't know that that was the Marauder 2. I thought that was just a variant of the Marauder.
No, that was the Marauder 2. They took the Marauder miniature and put wings on it. And
That's hilarious.
that was the Marauder. It was the same size, same everything. It's like if you wanted a Marauder 2, I mean, back then magnetization really wasn't a thing, but in theory, you could have magnetized wings onto it and swapped it out for either one, depending on what you wanted.
Make it like a transforming mech mid battle. You think you're fighting a Marauder? The wings fly in. Tugung! Marauder 2! All of a sudden I have jump jets!
Oh, well, that's one of the things that I do like is talking about transforming mechs. You have the Hell's Horses, I think it was. They have the Quad Vs, and they're the four-legged mechs that can turn into tanks.
I've never seen one or played with one on the table. That sounds
I
cool.
haven't played I haven't played competitively with them, because I go to Southern Assault every year, which I won that last year, and I went to the first Alpha Strike tournament I went to was in Tennessee. No faction limits, no technology limits, and I took a force that just curb stomped everything, and, if you listen to Wolfnet, they'll mention that watching that tournament is what made them make their rule set.
Nice.
And they reference, "Yeah, one cat went in there and just cleaned house." And it's like, "Yep, that was me. I broke it." But the quad Vs, their really cool trick is I think it's in the movement phase. I'd have to check. You declare which movement they're using, and their height changes depending on which one it is. So if you want to hide behind a hill or a level 1 building in Alpha Strike, because it does it instantaneously in Alpha Strike, you go, "I'm a tank now. I'm gonna go park behind this building, and you can't see me."
Wow.
The next turn, you go, "I'm a mech." You suddenly pop up, and you can shoot over the building, you know? And it's like, yeah, no, this is there. I could see some rule breaking capabilities in here, some game breaking capabilities if done properly.
Cool. Damn. Well, I could clearly talk to you for hours.
Oh yeah, I could see that.
But all good things must come to an end. If people haven't heard of your podcast before and they want to find you, they want to listen to you, where should they go?
All of the major podcast apps, Apple. I want to say I'm on Amazon Podcasts, Spotify, pretty much anywhere you'll find a podcast. Just look up Unicorn Company or on YouTube. I do the podcast and I also do review videos on YouTube. I work with Death Ray Designs on reviewing their terrain, and I actually just got the new what's it called Area of Operations set, and I've been building that and should have that out probably this month.
Ooh, exciting. I got to get into terrain. We've just been using the plain maps and we've printed some ourselves, but I really want to get some of the stuff that's actually professionally designed.
Death Ray Designs has a set that's called Hex City.
Mm-hmm.
It's MDF and it has hex bases on the bottom. I also have that. I need to review that. But there's also I haven't had a chance to get hold of it yet. The Hex Tech that Gale Force 9 I think put out.
I've seen the Hex Tech. That stuff is very interesting to me.
And that's all pre-painted and everything. You literally take it out of the box, put it down on the table.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because the thing is, I don't like painting. Like I like with my painted mechs on the table, but the process of painting is not something I enjoy, especially since I've had a kid. Because I just feel like it just painting takes time. We understand this.
Oh yeah.
And so I'd rather spend time playing or planning the podcast or something like that. So having painted terrain already, oh my goodness, that's the dream.
Oh, there's part of me that wishes Catalyst went the X-Wing route and pre-painted the models, because I can tell you from having played X-Wing, we would repaint over them anyway if we wanted to.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not that hard to do, like Aerodani Light Horse, they're all green and they have ELH logos. I mean, Mech Warrior did it, right?
Yeah, totally. Cool. Well, this has been a true privilege. Thank you for sharing your story with us and the podcast listeners, and for honoring me with the time.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really do appreciate it. And I've listened to y'all, and so far, I really like what I've heard.
Awesome. Well, I truly do appreciate that. Thank you. Especially from someone as seasoned as you in the community. That really means a lot.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for being here. We'll chat again soon.
Alrighty.
Well. That, my fellow mech warriors, was a blast. I hope you had as great a time listening as I did chatting with my fellow podcast creators. As a reminder, next month we will be returning to our standard format, including the Stories of the Innersphere segment, the special surprise. And of course, as promised, we will be reviewing the results of Episode 9's Insert Your Name Here BattleTech Favorite Survey, which you actually still have a few weeks to fill out if you haven't already. The survey is linked in the description in case you haven't had a chance to fill it out yet. Remember, if you like what you hear, we appreciate your reviews and you sharing the word with other BattleTech fans. Until next time, Mech Warriors, good fortunes on the battlefield. Selah.
All podcast objectives complete. Podcast shutdown sequence initiated.